Chapter 1: The Wedding Night, General Hawthorne's Estate. Inside the red wedding canopy, candlelight flickered. Dressed in a magnificent red wedding gown, Seraphina Ainsworth sat by the bed, her delicate face beneath the red veil filled with anticipation and nervousness. Tonight, she would finally marry the man she had loved for years, the great General Ethan Hawthorne. Suddenly, the door was kicked open with great force. A gust of wind seemed to sweep in as a powerful hand seized Seraphina's wrist and flung her brutally to the floor. She cried out in pain. "Ah, harlot, how dare you drug me?" A cold, furious voice boomed from above her. The veil was ripped away and fell to the ground. She looked up in terror, her eyes meeting the man's dark, sinister gaze. "General, what are you saying?" Ethan Hawthorne sneered with contempt. He bent down, grabbing her chin with his hand, his teeth clenched. "When't you just want me to consummate this marriage, don't you?" "Well, I refuse to grant your wish." His fingers tightened, a cruel smirk playing on his lips as he tossed his sword aside. "Someone, bring Lady Ivy in." The chilling cold in the man's handsome features stunned Seraphina. Her voice and body trembled in unison. "General, what have I done wrong for you to treat me this way?" How could the husband she had yearned to marry on her wedding night treat her like this? Ethan sneered. "Don't play dumb." Just as he finished speaking, the door was pushed open. Ethan's concubine, Ivy Blackwood, glided in gracefully and curtsied to him. "General." Ivy Blackwood was the most sought-after singer in the capital, and also Seraphina's former bosom friend. Her seductive gaze swept over Seraphina, a cold, sinister curve forming on her lips. Ethan helped Ivy up. "Ivy, tonight is my wedding night. Are you willing to spend it with me?" "It is my honor to serve you, General." Ivy blushed, joining the man on the bed. Seraphina's eyes widened in shock as she watched Ethan strip Ivy's clothes, layer by layer. Her gaze fixed on the ornate bed, tears blurring her vision. Her heart felt as if it had been pierced by that sword, the pain suffocating. From the wide sleeve of her robe, she drew a dagger and looked at the man on the bed with tear-filled eyes. "General, do you remember this dagger? Since you promised to marry me, why would you humiliate me like this today?" The dagger was engraved with his family name, Hawthorne. He had given it to her himself. The man ignored her words. After a long while, he got off the bed, slowly dressing himself as he looked down at the woman kneeling on the floor. "Seraphina Ainsworth, do you think you can deceive me with a fake dagger?" Seraphina was stunned. "General, this was the token of love you gave me. How could it be fake? It was just that. At the time, I was meeting you under the identity of my handmaiden, Daisy Miller." Before she could finish, Ethan's fists clenched. He suddenly lunged forward, his hands wrapping around her neck as he glared at her with murderous intent. "Wretched woman, you killed my Daisy, and now you want to use a fake token to marry me in her place. Do you take me for a fool? Do you think I would marry a harlot like you, who has been with countless men?" "I have not," Seraphina denied desperately. "General, I am Daisy." Chapter 2: Fooling around. When had she ever harmed Daisy? When had she ever been with other men? She was the Daisy. He knew the man shoved her away violently and ordered in a harsh voice, "Men, take this wretched woman away and make her kneel in the courtyard." "I don't want her ruining my sight." Seraphina's eyes filled with panic. It was the dead of winter, and heavy snow was falling outside. As soon as Ethan finished speaking, several attendants burst in and quickly restrained Seraphina. "General," Seraphina explained frantically, "the real Daisy is indeed my personal handmaiden. When I first met you, I was using her identity, but the one who fell in love with you was me, disguised as Daisy." It was all her fault. She blamed her playful nature. Since childhood, she had hated being confined to the Prime Minister's estate. So, she had someone make skin-like masks for herself and Daisy. She let Daisy take her place in the estate to study arts and literature, while she went out to play under Daisy's identity. Then, she had a chance encounter with Ethan Hawthorne, who was just an imperial guard at the time, and they fell for each other. Back then, he didn't know she was the Prime Minister's daughter, and she didn't know he served in the Imperial Guard. It wasn't until she accompanied her father to a palace banquet and saw him from afar that she realized he was Ethan Hawthorne. Newly appointed as the valiant general by His Majesty, the Emperor, they exchanged messages by carrier pigeon and agreed to meet during the Mid-Autumn Festival. She had planned to tell him the truth, but after she arrived at their meeting spot, he never came. She waited until 2 years later when she came of age. then asked her father to request the marriage from the emperor. She never expected that on her wedding night, the man she had longed for wouldn't believe her at all. Silence. Ethan interrupted impatiently, his eyes filled with ice. Since you used your father Alaric Ainsworth's power as prime minister to have the emperor decree this marriage, then I have married you, and it just so happens, I was wondering how to avenge the deceased Daisy. The man flicked his long sleeve and roared. Take her away, General. Serafina wanted to explain further, but she was already being dragged out roughly by the boorish attendants. In the courtyard, the snow fell heavily, and the wind was bitingly cold. Dressed in her thin wedding gown, Serafina shivered violently as the guards forced her to kneel in the snow. Her magnificent red dress was a startling sight against the white ground. Serafina bit her lip tightly, but she couldn't stop trembling. Her lips quickly turned purple from the cold, yet she continued to murmur, General, I really am your Daisy. Humiliating tears fell from her eyes, freezing into ice on her cheeks. Soon, Serafina grew numb from the cold. Her frail body, like a snowflake, swayed and collapsed. Ivy Blackwood stepped outside, glanced at the woman in the snow, and a sinister smile touched her lips. Serafina Ainsworth, you never dreamed of this, did you? That you, the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter, would see such a day? Heh, you'd better hold on. The real show is just beginning not long after. Ethan was reading in his study when a servant burst in. It's terrible, General, the mistress, is she dead? Ethan glanced at the man, his tone icy. Send someone to the Prime Minister's estate tomorrow and tell them the mistress died from freezing while admiring the snow at night. No, the servant hurried forward. General, you must come quickly. The mistress and the personal guard she brought with her are in the woodshed. What? Ethan shot to his feet, threw down his book, and strode out of the room. The snow fell silently in the quiet night. Only when he approached the woodshed did he hear the sound of a man's low, panting breaths from within. Anyone hearing that sound would know what was happening inside. A surge of fury rose from the bottom of Ethan's heart. He gritted his teeth, lifted his foot, and kicked the woodshed door open. A servant quickly entered with a lantern, and the scene inside was instantly illuminated. Serafina lay on the ground, her clothes in disarray, revealing patches of pale skin, a truly indecent sight. And a man in a guard's uniform was hastily undressing, his breath coming in urgent, heavy gasps. Sira. This guard was the one she had brought from the Prime Minister's estate, Leo Kane. Chapter 3. Unbearably hot, you adulterous pair, Ethan, his eyes blazing with fury, lunged forward and kicked Leo Kane viciously. Leo cried out as his body slammed against the wall and fell back down. He twitched once and then lay still. At that moment, Serafina's face was flushed an unnatural red, and her body writhed restlessly. Hot! In her hazy consciousness, she felt as if she had been freezing to death moments ago, but now she was suddenly overcome by an unbearable heat, an agonizing torment like being roasted over a fire. Looking at the woman on the ground, Ethan stepped forward and seized her wrist. He clenched his other fist, ready to strike, but the woman suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her body against his. Hot! So hot. The woman's lithe curves moved against him, and Ethan felt his fury instantly transform into lust. Damn, this woman, a single touch from her had so easily aroused him. Harlot, the man gritted his teeth, his voice laced with scorn. Let's see just how potent your seductive arts really are. With that, he pushed Serafina down and tore away all her remaining clothes. A sharp pain made Serafina cry out, and she instantly became a third more sober. The servant holding the lantern was terrified by the scene. He quickly dragged the unconscious Leo out and closed the woodshed door. Ethan suddenly froze. Could this harlot still be a virgin? Impossible. Ivy had told him herself that her supposed best friend had been with numerous men before she was married. The thought of all the rumors he had heard about Serafina's promiscuity made the man's teeth grind with hatred. The pain finally caused Serafina to faint. Outside the door, Ivy Blackwood, who had rushed over upon hearing the news, listened to the man's heavy breathing inside and clenched her teeth in hatred. That damn Serafina, even in that state. She can still seduce the general. I should have just let her die. Serafina was jolted awake by a basin of ice-cold water thrown over her head. The clothes that the maids had just put on her were soaked again. Shivering, she slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Leo Kane prostrate on the ground beside her, trembling all over, she frowned in confusion. Just as she was about to speak, a cold voice came from her side. "Seraphina Ainsworth, you harlot, on the very first day of our marriage, you dare to commit adultery with your guard?" Seraphina froze, turning her head to meet Ethan's eyes, which were filled with rage and murderous intent. She couldn't help but tremble. "General, I don't understand what you mean." In her jumbled memories, it was clearly the general. How could it be Leo? Still trying to deny it? Ethan sneered, walking over and squatting down to grab her by the chin, his dark eyes staring at her. "I saw you two tumbling in passion with my own eyes, and you still won't admit it." Looking at the man who had once been so gentle with her now so cold and severe, Seraphina's heart shattered once more. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She choked back a sob. "From the moment I met you 5 years ago, General, my heart has belonged only to you. Leo is my attendant. How could I possibly? With him?" Seeing the woman's clear, tear-filled eyes, the man's sharp gaze suddenly wavered, and he let her go. "Leo Kane, you speak what happened just now." Chapter 4. Nonsense. Kneeling on the ground, Leo Kane trembled like a leaf in the wind. Hearing the question, he began to speak, his voice shaking. Reporting to the general. I am the mistress's attendant. I saw her nearly freezing in the snow, so I secretly brought a cloak over to warm her." Unexpectedly, the mistress was burning hot. She held on to me and begged me to take her away. I couldn't bear to see her freeze to death, so I took her to the woodshed. I never thought the mistress would hold on to me and not let go, saying that when she drugged the general, she had taken the drug herself, and she begged me to take her. I didn't dare, but she fed me a pill. After that, I couldn't resist. Hearing this, Seraphina looked at him in shock and shouted, "Leo, what nonsense are you spouting?" They had practically grown up together. She had always treated him well. Why would he lie like this? "Good, very good," Ethan sneered. "Truly my good wife a harlot who seduces men?" "No," Seraphina firmly denied it. "General, please see the truth. I neither drugged you nor did I seduce Leo." Just as she finished speaking, Ethan's personal guard entered from outside and handed him a rouge box. "General, this was found in the mistress's dowry. It's the same intoxicating incense you were affected by seeing the box." Seraphina immediately shook her head. "That's not mine." Ivy Blackwood, who had been standing silently to the side, coughed lightly and said in a low voice, "Sister, you may not know, but the general dislikes fragrances, so all scents are forbidden in this estate. If this incense isn't yours, whose could it be?" Ethan sneered and said sternly, "The witness and evidence are all here. The mistress committed adultery with her guard. Take her out immediately and have her drowned in a cage." His command was devoid of any warmth, filled only with overwhelming hatred and anger. Seraphina had no time to defend herself. A towel was stuffed in her mouth, and a pig cage was roughly forced over her. With no chance to explain or struggle, Seraphina was tied up and carried out of the general's estate through the back gate. In the vast, snowy landscape, the woman's red robe was particularly striking. Her beautiful face was deathly pale, only her glass-like eyes were filled with humiliation and defiance. Splash! She was thrown into the lake. Snow was still falling on the lake's surface, and the water was bone-chillingly cold. Seraphina's eyes widened in terror as she struggled violently. But her body still sank, bit by bit, toward the bottom of the lake. Ethan had just returned to his study when a maid rushed in to report, "General, the old madam's heart condition has flared up again, and she has fainted. The doctor says that the mistress's family has a divine herb, and only the mistress knows how to use it." A divine herb. Ethan's brows furrowed. He had indeed heard that the Ainsworth family possessed a resurrection grass, a divine herb that could bring the dead back to life and was priceless in this world. The man clenched his fists and frowned. "For now, spare that wench's life. Send someone to bring her back?" Yes, Seraphina thought she was going to die. At the bottom of the lake, she seemed to see a light, and at the other end of the light, her long-departed mother was beckoning to her. The icy lake water poured into her mouth, one gulp after another, chilling her organs to the core. "General, I really am your daisy." Just as she was about to close her eyes in despair, several guards who had jumped into the lake pulled Seraphina up. Shivering violently from the cold, she fainted as soon as she was brought ashore. When Seraphina woke up, it was the next day. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Ethan standing by the window with his hands behind his back. A flicker of joy lit up within her, and she called out in surprise, "General." Could it be that the general had a change of heart and chosen to believe her? That's why Ethan turned around, his face cold as he looked at the woman on the bed. I have heard that the Ainsworth family possesses a resurrection grass that can bring the dead back to life. My mother has suffered from a heart condition for many years. If you can save the old madam with the divine herb, I will spare your life. The man's tone was light, but every word was an undeniable command. Seraphina's heart sank a little, but she still struggled to sit up and curtsy to him. I dare not deceive you, General. There is no such divine herb in the Prime Minister's estate. For years, my father and I have found the rumors strange, and we do not know who started them. So you refuse to give it? Ethan's voice suddenly rose, his eyes filled with ice. The hands behind his back were clenched into tight fists. He had long heard that Seraphina treasured that divine herb as a priceless artifact, not even allowing others to look at it, let alone give it away. It was just as he expected. General, I don't have any divine herb. How can I give it to you? Seraphina was bewildered. Who on earth was spreading these rumors, venomous witch you refused to save a life? Ethan gritted his teeth and said coldly. As he was about to leave, flicking his sleeve, Ivy Blackwood gracefully entered. General, Ivy bowed to the man. I have heard that when a family member is ill, one can cut off one's own flesh to heal them. I have already bathed and prayed, and I am prepared to cut my flesh to heal Mother's health cannot be delayed. Please allow me to show my filial piety to Mother. After speaking, she prostrated herself at Ethan's feet. Her sincere and filial appearance moved Ethan. He quickly helped her up. I have married a good concubine. With that, he turned and looked coldly at Seraphina on the bed. Men throw this venomous witch who refuses to save a life into the woodshed. After Ethan and Ivy left, the guards carried Seraphina and threw her into the woodshed. Curled up in a cold corner, she wept silently. They had promised to win one heart and never be apart. Why, when they met again, did he not recognize her at all? As Seraphina shivered from the cold, the woodshed door was pushed open, and Ivy Blackwood entered with her handmaiden. My dear sister, you've been wronged. Ivy squatted down in front of her, her eyes full of triumph. Seraphina's lips curved into a self-mocking smile. It was you who twisted the truth about me and Daisy to the general, wasn't it? Ivy raised her eyebrows defiantly. So what if it was? Do you think the general will believe you? Ivy Blackwood, you will get what you deserve, Seraphina said hatefully. Ivy's smile vanished, and she raised her hand, her face vicious, and grabbed Seraphina's chin. My dear sister, I don't know when my retribution will come, but yours has arrived right now. I'm going to cut your flesh to save the general's mother. With that, she lifted Seraphina's sleeve and took a gleaming dagger from her handmaiden's hand. Chapter 5. A slap. Seraphina's eyes widened, and she forcefully pulled her hand back, shouting, Insolent! Seraphina Ainsworth, do you still think you're my best friend, the general's wife? Ivy sneered with contempt and slapped Seraphina hard across the face. What right do you have to shout at me? Seraphina's head was knocked to the side, her face burning with pain. As she turned her face back, she saw Ivy take a peach wood comb with 2 missing teeth from her wide sleeve. Seraphina froze, becoming extremely agitated. Where did you get that comb? As she reached for it, Ivy raised her hand and smiled. It seems my sister still remembers her ill-fated mother. Her mother's this comb was indeed her mother's, enduring the pain racking her body. Seraphina stood up. Ivy Blackwood, how do you have my mother's things? Her mother had gone out 5 years ago and never returned, and this peachwood comb was a gift from her father to her mother back then. Her mother had said she would take this comb with her wherever she went. Ivy raised her eyebrows provocatively. If you want to know, then obediently let me cut your flesh for the general's mother, otherwise, I'll have your mother killed secretly right now. She spoke through gritted teeth, her tone sinister and cold, causing Seraphina's heart to ache with pain. So her mother might really still be alive. Seraphina gritted her teeth, extended her arm, and resolutely rolled up her sleeve. Cut! Ivy let out a triumphant, cold snort. My sister knows what's good for her when the general sees that I cut my flesh for his mother. I wonder if he'll divorce you and make me his official wife. With that, she suddenly took out the dagger and, gritting her teeth, scraped it viciously down Seraphina's upper arm. The blade cut through skin and flesh. The bone-deep pain instantly caused a cold sweat to break out on Seraphina's body, and she shivered from the cold that seemed to pierce her organs. Gushing blood flowed down her fair wrist, a shocking sight. Although Serafina bit her lip, trying to endure the pain without crying out, the excruciating agony made her bite her other hand in a desperate attempt to cope. The handmaiden quickly brought a porcelain bowl and collected the bloody flesh. Ivy retracted the dagger with satisfaction. "Thank you, sister, as for how this wound came to be, my sister is so clever, I'm sure you won't let the general misunderstand, right?" With that, she turned to leave. "Ivy Blackwood, where is my mother?" Serafina endured the pain, asking word by word. "When the general's mother is well, I'll naturally tell you," Ivy, holding the porcelain bowl, instructed her handmaiden. "Bandage the mistress's wound well, and don't let the general find out." "Yes, you!" Serafina, unwilling to give up, tried to chase after her, but the world went black and she fainted. The handmaiden disdainfully bandaged her arm and quickly left. Night, Ethan came out of his study and was about to return to his room when he suddenly smelled a faint fragrance in the air. It was light and subtle, almost imperceptible. But the scent was very familiar. Was it an orchid fragrance? The man's brows furrowed. He stepped into the snow, following the scent. After wandering around the estate, he found that the fragrance was strongest near the woodshed. He glanced hesitantly in that direction, walked over, and pushed the door open. The faint orchid fragrance grew stronger, rushing to meet him, making him stop and take a deep breath. Huddled in a corner, Serafina was delirious with a high fever, mumbling nonsense. "Ethan, Ethan. Don't go." Ethan's deep eyes suddenly sharpened. He strode over and picked up the shivering woman. "What did you say?" She called him Ethan. Besides his mother, only Daisy had ever called him that, feeling the burning heat of her body. The man's brows knitted together. He quickly carried her out. Serafina woke up the next morning. Before she could fully open her eyes, a familiar, urgent voice spoke. "Serafina Ainsworth, I ask you, why do you emit an orchid fragrance when you have a fever?" He remembered clearly. Daisy had once told him that every time she was seriously ill, her body would emit an orchid fragrance. The stronger the scent, the more severe the illness, but he had never seen Daisy sick. Serafina propped herself up and sat up. Seeing the man sitting by the bed, her eyes couldn't help but well up with tears. "General Sira?" Sira is Daisy. Back then, Sira was playful and swapped identities with Daisy. "I went out to play with Daisy's face and identity, and that's how I met you." Ethan stared at the tearful woman before him, a hint of doubt appearing in his handsome features. "Then do you know what token of love Daisy once gave me?" Serafina nodded. "It was a scented pouch." Ethan stood up. "Good, as long as you can make a pouch identical to that one, I will believe you." "This." Serafina's brow furrowed. "Sira can't make it. She was completely unskilled at needlework. That pouch had been made by Daisy herself. How could she possibly make it?" Ethan's face, which had just softened slightly, instantly darkened. He narrowed his eyes and looked at her coldly. "And you still dare to say you are my Daisy?" With that, the man's anger flared. He stepped forward and grabbed Serafina's arm. "You lying harlot!" His hand was right on the spot where her flesh had been cut. The sudden pain made her cry out. "Ah!" She forcefully pulled her arm back, clutching the injured spot with her other hand. The man's deep eyes sharpened. "What's on your arm?" Just now, when his hand gripped her arm, he had clearly felt something hard there. "No, nothing." Serafina finally reacted and quickly clutched her sleeve tighter. He couldn't see it, or Ivy Blackwood would kill her mother. Ethan narrowed his eyes, stepped forward, and ripped the clothes off her body. "I insist on seeing for myself." Chapter 6. An old friend returned. Serafina was shocked and quickly said, "It's nothing. Since I was young, I've had a large red birthmark on my arm. It bleeds and oozes pus from time to time. This part of my arm is very ugly." Ethan had already torn her clothes, revealing thick white gauze wrapped around her arm. Serafina pulled her hand back. "I'm afraid it will offend the general's eyes. It's better if you don't look." Fortunately, whatever that handmaiden of Ivy's had used to bandage the wound, not a single trace of blood had seeped through. Seeing her dodge, Ethan's thin lips curved, and he was about to speak when Serafina hurriedly said, "General, I can save your mother. Please give me a chance to atone for my crimes." "Atone for your crimes?" She had successfully diverted his attention. Ethan's eyes deepened. "What crimes?" Serafina lowered her gaze. I shouldn't have deceived you. General, I beg you to spare my life." As long as I make no more mistakes, please don't banish me from the general's estate. In that split second, a good plan had come to her. There was a deep misunderstanding between them. Right now, he didn't believe her at all, and she, constrained by Ivy Blackwood's threats, dared not reveal the whole truth of the past. More importantly, she lacked evidence. Only by staying in the general's estate would she have a chance to find the truth. After all, Ivy Blackwood and Leo Kane were still here. To turn things around, she had to start with them. Ethan flicked his robe and sat down on the stool by the bed, looking at her coldly. "Are you threatening me?" Serafina quickly gathered her robe. "Sierra wouldn't dare. Sierra only wants to do her best to heal your mother." Ethan narrowed his eyes and stared at the woman before him, his deep eyes turning slightly. Although he hadn't seen Daisy for 2 years, the Serafina before him, apart from her face, had a figure, temperament, and voice that were indeed very similar to Daisy's. Could there really be something strange about this matter? "Fine, I agree. I will spare your life for now. If you fail to heal the old madam, or if you make another mistake, I will certainly not let you off lightly." After speaking, the man stood up and strode away. Serafina watched his tall figure leave the room and let out a deep sigh of relief. She had to seize this opportunity, get the evidence, and make him believe her. At the same time, she had to find out from Ivy Blackwood where her mother was. After recovering in her room for a day, Serafina went to the matriarch's residence. Every day, she administered acupuncture, gave massages, and personally brewed medicine, taking meticulous care of her. 10 days later, the old madam, who had been bedridden for half a year, was actually able to get out of bed and walk. Ethan often stood outside the window, watching the woman take care of the old madam, and images of Daisy taking his pulse in the past flashed through his mind. And in a corner of the corridor behind Ethan, Ivy Blackwood watched the man staring at the people inside and clenched her fists in hatred. This day, having just returned to her room from the old madam's residence, Serafina finally saw Leo Kane, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. Leo knelt with a thud and cried, "Miss, I have failed you. My family's lives are in someone else's hands. I had no choice but to betray you." Serafina looked at him coldly. "Come inside to talk." After entering the room, Serafina said to him with a cold face, "Leo, you and I grew up together. I have treated you well. I can let go of the fact that you betrayed and framed me last time, and I won't force you to tell me who instigated you. Right now, I just want to ask you for a favor." Leo was so grateful that tears streamed down his face. "As long as I can do it, I would die 10,000 times for you," Serafina nodded. "Go with me to see the general now and tell him that Daisy and I used to swap identities." Apart from herself and Daisy, only Leo and the Prime Minister's estate knew about their identity swap. As long as the general believed this first, he would surely start to suspect Ivy Blackwood. Not only could she prove her identity, but she might also have a chance to find out her mother's whereabouts from Ivy. Leo wiped his tears and nodded without hesitation. "I will tell everything I know." The two of them immediately went, one after the other, to Ethan's room. As they entered the courtyard, they saw Ethan's room door open, and a woman in green was embracing him tightly. When she saw the side profile of the woman in green, Serafina was stunned and stopped in her tracks. Daisy was back. Chapter 7, Not Dead. Surprised and overjoyed, Serafina walked over quickly. "Daisy." Hearing the voice, Ethan and Daisy released each other and turned to look outside. When they came face to face, and Serafina saw that the woman before her was indeed the real Daisy, her eyes instantly turned red with emotion. She stepped forward and hugged her. "Daisy, it's really you? You're not dead. That's wonderful." Ethan looked at Serafina coldly, a contemptuous snort escaping his nose. Daisy, however, pushed her away coldly, her face filled with disgust and hatred. "Miss, you're quite an actress. You drove me away back then just to marry the general in my place. I never thought you'd actually succeed." Serafina froze, the excited tears that were about to fall stuck in her eyes. "Daisy, what are you talking about?" She was utterly astonished. The woman before her was definitely the Daisy who had disappeared 2 years ago, just a bit thinner. They had also grown up together. Their height and build were very similar. It was just that Daisy had a sweet tooth, so her figure was slightly fuller than hers. Now that she was thinner, apart from their faces, they were very similar. And back then, to deceive her father and the servants, They had imitated each other's voices for so long that even their voices were hard to tell apart, but Seraphina didn't understand. How could Daisy, who had always been absolutely loyal to her, say such strange things? Daisy's lips curled into a cold smile. She turned and walked gracefully to Ethan's side. "General, you see, even in front of me, she still won't admit it." Slap! Ethan slammed his palm on the table in anger, his cold eyes fixed on Seraphina. "Wretched woman, the Daisy you had killed has returned from the dead, and you still want to deny it." The situation had developed so suddenly that Seraphina couldn't figure out Daisy's motive. After a moment's hesitation, she turned to look at Leo Kane. "Leo, you know the most about Daisy and me swapping identities back then. In front of everyone, tell the truth. Was the person who met and fell in love with the general back then Daisy, or was it me?" Leo looked at Seraphina guiltily, then slowly moved to Daisy's side and lowered his head. "Miss, give it up, stop deceiving the general. We all grew up together. It was Daisy's good fortune that the general took a liking to her back then. Why must you compete with your own handmaiden for this?" Hearing this, Seraphina's eyes widened, and her frail body trembled uncontrollably. "Leo, you just said you would tell everything you know. Why have you and Daisy both betrayed me in my whole life? Seraphina Ainsworth has only had you two as friends." "You!" A sweet, metallic taste rose from her heart, and Seraphina coughed up a mouthful of blood. She was in too much pain to speak, just staring at the three people before her with misty eyes, her heart feeling as if it were being torn apart. One was the man who had promised her a lifetime, and the other two, though her handmaiden and attendant, were her only friends since childhood. She had treated them all with a true heart. Why, in the blink of an eye, had they all turned on her like this? Ethan walked up to her with his hands behind his back, grabbed her chin fiercely, and said through gritted teeth, "What a prime minister's daughter! If my Daisy hadn't returned in time, I might have actually believed your lies." With that, he shoved her away forcefully. Seraphina's frail body fell to the ground like a withered leaf. Ethan walked over to Daisy, looked at her lovingly, and put his arm around her shoulder. "Since my Daisy has returned, I will soon petition my imperial brother to allow me to divorce this wife who committed adultery with her guard on our wedding night and marry Daisy as my wife." The man's tone was resolute. After speaking, he looked at Daisy with a gentle and doting expression. "I will make up for everything I owe you." "Thank you, General." Daisy curtsied, her face shy. Sitting on the ground, Seraphina was heartbroken and despairing. Tears blurred her vision as she watched them leave together. Another mouthful of blood surged from her throat. Looking at the pool of blood on the stone tiles, her heart felt as if it were bleeding profusely. Why? What had she done wrong to deserve such betrayal from everyone she trusted? Chapter 8. Silencing a witness after Seraphina returned to her room, a maid delivered Ethan's order. "The general has commanded that before he petitions the emperor to divorce you, you are not to step out of the general's estate, nor are you to see any outsiders." Seraphina's heart was filled with nothing but despair. She gave a sad little smile. "Where could I go? Wherever I go, I'll be caught and brought back, and sooner or later I'll be branded an adulteress." After sitting blankly in her room for a day, just as Seraphina was thinking about how to contact the prime minister's estate, a maid opened the door to announce, "Mistress, Miss Daisy invites you to reminisce and says she has something important to tell you." Daisy wanted to see her. Seraphina stood up almost without hesitation and followed the maid out. By the garden pond, she saw Daisy standing there in a green dress. Seraphina breathed a sigh of relief and walked over quickly. Hearing footsteps, Daisy turned around. Seeing that it was indeed Seraphina, her face lit up with joy, and she came forward, wanting to take her hand. "Miss," Seraphina stopped and pulled her hand back. Taking her by surprise, she raised her hand and gave Daisy a resounding slap. "Daisy, I, Seraphina Ainsworth, have treated you well. Since we were young, I let you take my place to study arts, literature, etiquette, and needlework, raising you to be a well-bred young lady, and how have you repaid me?" Seraphina's hands, hidden in her sleeves, were clenched tightly as she tried to control her emotions. Seeing this familiar yet strangely unfamiliar maid, she really wanted to dig out her heart to see if she had any conscience at all after being slapped. Daisy's tears rolled down her cheeks, and she knelt before her with a thud. "I'm sorry, miss, even if I died 10,000 times, I could never repay your kindness. I never wanted to betray you, but I was truly forced." 2 years ago, I was forcibly taken from the Prime Minister's estate. For these 2 years, I've lived a life worse than death. My return this time was also under someone's orders. Miss, I was really forced, you know, that I have someone I love. I don't like the general at all, Daisy wept piteously, her eyes filled with guilt. But in Serafina's eyes, it was all hard to believe. Leo had acted the same way that day, only to betray her again in the blink of an eye. Who could she trust now? After a moment of thought, Serafina helped Daisy up and said, "Fine, since you say you were forced, then tell me who forced you." "Don't worry, as long as you tell the truth, I guarantee you'll be safe, and I'll guarantee the person you care about will be safe too." Daisy quickly wiped her tears. "Miss." Just as she was about to speak, she caught a glimpse of Ivy Blackwood approaching with Ethan in the distance. A thought flashed through her mind, and she grabbed Serafina's hands. "Miss, I'm so sorry. I'm selfish. Only my death can atone for my sins." Serafina frowned in confusion. "Daisy, I'm asking you, who forced you?" Daisy, however, looked terrified, shaking her head desperately. She clung to Serafina's hand, her body backing away. "Miss, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Behind her was the pond. Just as Serafina was about to grab her, Daisy pushed her away, took 2 steps back, and fell straight into the pond. With a splash, the green figure disappeared into the water. Serafina was stunned. In her daze, a black figure flew past her and jumped into the pond. "Daisy, who else could it be but Ethan?" "Daisy, why did you do that?" Serafina was completely bewildered. But she was certain that Daisy had fallen into the water on purpose. "Sister, are you scared to see Daisy back?" Ivy's sinister voice came from nearby. Serafina suddenly turned her head and instantly understood. "Ivy Blackwood, you had Daisy ask me here, then made her create the illusion that I pushed her into the water, just so you could bring Ethan here to see?" Ivy shrugged. "You're still as clever as ever, alas. What can I do?" "I hate your cleverness the most." Just as she finished speaking, Ethan emerged from the pond, carrying Daisy, both of them soaking wet. "General!" Before Serafina could say another word, the enraged Ethan kicked her in the stomach, sending her sprawling to the ground. "Venomous witch, how dare you push my Daisy into the water?" "I didn't." Serafina endured the pain, racking her body, and defended herself. Ivy's eyes lit up. She ran to her side, took a dagger from her sleeve, and handed it to Ethan. "General, I just saw Daisy give this dagger to my sister before she fell into the water." Ethan, who was about to leave with the wet and unconscious Daisy in his arms, glanced at the dagger. "This is the dagger I gave Daisy as a token of our love. This one is real." Ivy immediately feigned a sudden realization. "I see my sister must have killed Daisy to get this real dagger and silence her." Hearing this, before Serafina could speak, Ethan kicked her again. Venomous witch, go to hell. This kick, filled with the man's absolute hatred, sent Serafina flying into the lake. Then he hurried away with Daisy in his arms. Chapter 9. Go to hell. Her body, not yet fully recovered, fell once again into the bone-chillingly cold lake water. Serafina struggled desperately. Seeing her face emerge from the water, Ivy wore a look of sinister triumph. Serafina Ainsworth, go to hell. Ethan carried the unconscious Daisy back to her room, carefully placing her on the bed. He immediately ordered, "Summon a doctor at once, prepare hot water." As he was about to get up, Daisy grabbed his arm and spoke weakly. "Please, General, please let my sister save me." Ethan's brows furrowed. "She pushed you into the lake. She wishes you were dead." "Why would you want her to save you?" Daisy coughed up a mouthful of water. "Please, General, I only want my sister to take my pulse." Seeing her shivering from the cold, Ethan's brow creased with pity. "All right, hold on. I'll have someone bring her here right away." Serafina thought she was surely going to die this time, but unexpectedly, she was rescued again. Shivering from the cold, her face blue, she was brought directly to Ethan. Ethan narrowed his eyes and looked at her coldly. "Serafina Ainsworth, I command you to save my Daisy and nurse her back to health. If anything happens to Daisy, I will kill you." Serafina prostrated herself and replied in a low voice, Sira will do her best." While she was underwater, a suspicion had formed in her mind. Daisy's appearance was too strange. Could the Daisy before her not be the real Daisy? Could she, like her years ago, be wearing a mask of Daisy's face? Since she had survived, and Ethan had ordered her to take care of Daisy, she naturally accepted. This would give her a chance to see if this Daisy was the real one. After Serafina arrived, Daisy fell into a coma. For the next few days, Serafina, despite her own poor health, diligently administered acupuncture and medicine to Daisy without a single moment of neglect. To her disappointment, the Daisy before her was the real Daisy. Not only was she not wearing any mask, but the red mole on her inner thigh was also there. Looking at the still unconscious Daisy on the bed, Serafina sighed. Daisy, what on earth has happened these past 2 years? Why have you become like this? We were once like sisters. Who did you betray me for? Before she could finish her sentence, a tall figure entered the room, blocking the sunlight. As Serafina turned her head, her chin was forcefully seized, and her eyes met the man's cold gaze. Beside him stood Ivy Blackwood, who had entered with him. Venomous witch, you've been treating my Daisy for days, and she still hasn't woken up. Are you doing this on purpose? Ethan was filled with murderous intent, his bottomless eyes filled with hatred. Remembering the tenderness and affection that once filled those eyes, Serafina's tears suddenly fell. General, Sierra has used all her medical skills. Why Daisy hasn't woken up, Sierra truly doesn't understand. Just as she finished speaking, Ivy Blackwood, who had walked to the bedside, suddenly cried out in panic. It's terrible, General, this. How is Daisy not breathing? Ethan froze. He quickly let go of Serafina, turned, and sat down on the bed, his trembling hand reaching for Daisy's nose. In the next second, the worry on Ethan's handsome face turned to grief, and then to rage. He spun around, kicking Serafina hard in the chest. The woman's frail body was sent flying backward, hitting the window hard before falling to the ground with a thud. Serafina cried out in pain, the world went black, and she fainted. Chapter 10. Admiration, quick, get a doctor for me. Ethan, as if possessed, held Daisy's body and roared. His Daisy who had just been returned to him, could not die so easily. She could not at this thought. The man's bloodshot eyes glared at Serafina on the floor, and he commanded sternly, "Throw this venomous witch into the woodshed. I will have her sliced to pieces another day." When Serafina woke up, it was 3 days later. For those 3 days, she had been in a daze, as if in a dream, a very long dream. In her dream, there was only the man with sharp brows and bright, star-like eyes, his gaze full of tenderness. He held her hand. Daisy, whether you are a handmaiden or a high-born lady, it doesn't change my admiration for you. Ethan, Ethan. Murmuring his name, Serafina opened her eyes. Her gaze met a pair of seductive eyes filled with a malicious smile. Serafina's heart jumped, and she instinctively shrank back into the corner. Ivy Blackwood, what are you doing here? Ivy smiled with immense triumph. I've come to tell my dear sister that your good handmaiden, Daisy, has been killed by your treatment. Impossible, it must have been you. You did something, Serafina frowned, using all her strength to speak. Ivy Blackwood, was it you who sent Daisy away 2 years ago? Don't make baseless accusations, Ivy sneered, her eyes filled with venom. Sister, I'm here to send you to hell. You killed Daisy. The general, punishing you for all your crimes, has granted you a cup of poisoned wine, leaving you an intact corpse. He has been merciful. With that, she raised her hand, and a maid brought over the wine. Serafina was horrified. No, I did nothing wrong. I didn't do anything. Why must I die? Don't be in such a hurry. Ivy smiled lightly and raised her hand again. The guards behind her brought in a small table and neatly arranged a brush, ink, paper, and an inkstone. Serafina looked at her, confused. What other tricks are you playing? Ivy raised an eyebrow and sneered. Serafina Ainsworth, your lover Leo Kane is dead. Overcome with grief, you write a suicide note and then kill yourself for him. Hearing this, Serafina froze. You want me to write a fake suicide note? To prove that I killed myself for love? Ivy nodded. That's right, even on your deathbed, sister. You are still so sharp. I won't write it, kill me. Serafina resolutely turned her face away. The general said, if you don't write it, the next one he'll deal with is your father, the prime minister, and the entire Ainsworth family. Ivy sighed. Sister, only by killing yourself can you save everyone, including your mother. Is my mother really still alive? Serafina asked urgently. Ivy swore to the heavens. If I, Ivy Blackwood, have told a single lie, may I die a horrible death. Serafina pressed her lips together and then suddenly let out a soft laugh. A laugh that was tragically beautiful and desolate. Fine, if I can't be trusted in life, then it's better to die and be done with it. Serafina picked up the brush, quickly wrote the suicide note, and signed her name. Ivy Blackwood, the truth will come out. Your retribution will come sooner or later. Serafina's eyes were filled with hatred as she looked at Ivy. Ivy quickly had someone take the suicide note and gave a signal to the guards. Immediately, 3 or 4 guards came up and held Serafina down. Everyone who knew about this is dead because of you. No one can bring me my retribution. Go in peace, Ivy said, a cold, sinister smile on her lips as she turned and gracefully left. Behind her, forced by several strong men, Serafina drank the cup of poisoned wine. Soon, she began to bleed from her 7 orifices and collapsed. The once devastatingly beautiful woman's breath slowly faded away. Less than an hour after Serafina's death, an order came from Ethan Hawthorne. Throw the body of the venomous witch Serafina Ainsworth onto the potter's field. Chapter 11. Posthumous possessions. The light body was casually wrapped in a worn-out mat and thrown onto the potter's field on the outskirts of the city. Ethan Hawthorne had finally avenged Daisy, but looking at the now-dead Daisy, his heart was still filled with pain. After Daisy was buried, he came to her grave every day and stayed with her for an hour. On the 7th day after Daisy's death, Ethan got blind drunk and staggered to Daisy's room. This room, the closest to his, was one he had hastily arranged for Daisy on the day she returned. He had not even had a proper conversation with his Daisy before she was killed by that woman. Serafina Ainsworth pushing open the door, Ethan, by the faint candlelight, walked through every corner of the room, trying to find more traces of Daisy. Daisy, I have failed you. I should have told you my identity sooner, so you wouldn't have been harmed by those with ill intentions. He sat down on her bed, his eyes filled with sorrow. His foot suddenly bumped into something. He looked down in surprise. It was a large chest. He remembered now. When Daisy had appeared at the estate gate that day, she had come with this chest. Seeing the object, Ethan was overcome with grief. He brought the candlestick over, placed it on the bed, and knelt to open Daisy's chest. The chest was not locked. It opened with a gentle pull. The next second, when he saw what was inside, the drunkenness vanished from the man's face, and his eyes widened in astonishment. The items in this chest should have been Daisy's precious possessions, which was why she carried them with her. There weren't many things in the chest, but they were neatly arranged. On the very top was a human skin mask, as thin as a cicada's wing. Ethan's heart trembled as he looked at the familiar features, and he reached out to pick it up. The mask was soft and extremely transparent, and the facial features on it were clearly Serafina's among Daisy's belongings. There was a human skin mask of Serafina Ainsworth. The image of the woman's tear-streaked face flashed through Ethan's mind as she choked out, "General, Sierra. Sierra is Daisy." Back then, Sierra was playful and swapped identities with Daisy. "I went out to play with Daisy's face and identity, and that's how I met you." Ethan's heart suddenly tightened with a strange sense of unease. He pushed the mask aside and looked at what was underneath. It was a thick stack of manuscripts, seemingly something Daisy had recorded. Ethan's heart stirred, and he opened the manuscript. Elegant and beautiful handwriting came into view. It was indeed Daisy's handwriting, but when Ethan saw the content, his face turned ashen. The manuscript was filled with emotion, every word and sentence revealing the writer's deep affection. However, the name written on it was not his. Ethan Hawthorne. Ethan flipped through the pages, his heart filled with rage. His knuckles turned white with anger. He had never imagined that the Daisy he had held so dear in his heart had betrayed him. A surge of fury welled up in his heart, leaving Ethan feeling nothing but resentment. Every word, every sentence, was like a knife carving into his flesh. He couldn't understand why the woman he had longed for was in love with someone else. They had once sworn vows to each other. How could this be? The person Daisy loved was clearly him. Why had it suddenly become that shadow guard by his imperial brother's side, Hugo Thorne? Ethan's fingers trembled. He wanted to tear these things to shreds, but he couldn't bring himself to do it, as they were the belongings of the woman he had loved. Just then, a servant's voice came from outside. Reporting to the general, the Prime Minister requests an audience. Ethan's hand paused. He looked up and realized that it was already dawn. He suppressed the raging fire in his heart and replied casually, "Where is the Prime Minister now?" "He has been shown to the main hall." "I will go see him." As Ethan spoke, he tossed the manuscript back into the chest and started to leave. At the door, however, he gave another order. "Have these things sent to my room. See that nothing is damaged." "As you command." Only then did Ethan go with the servant to the main hall. His obsidian eyes were filled with sarcasm. He certainly knew why this old codger, Alaric Ainsworth, had come, but this time, he had made a mistake when Ethan arrived at the main hall. Prime Minister Alaric Ainsworth was sitting in the seat of honor, drinking tea. Seeing Ethan, he quickly put down his cup. "Greetings, General. Prime Minister Ainsworth, you are too polite. May I ask why you have come?" Ethan feigned ignorance and sat down calmly. Although Alaric Ainsworth was his father-in-law, he had never liked him. Now that his legitimate daughter, Seraphina Ainsworth, was dead, he must have come to investigate after hearing the news. Alaric had indeed come for his daughter, but he also understood that he was in the general's estate. Even though he was the prime minister, he could not be too presumptuous. So he suppressed his anxiety and asked, "General, I have not seen my daughter for many days, and recently there have been some unpleasant rumors. I am worried, so I have come to visit." Chapter 12. Swayed by rumors, Ethan's lips curved slowly, a half-smile on his face as he glanced at Alaric Ainsworth. "I never thought the ever-wise Prime Minister Ainsworth could be swayed by rumors. Please understand a father's heart, General. Allow me to see my daughter." Ethan glanced at Alaric. "Very well. The Prime Minister's love for his daughter is indeed touching, but..." Ethan's smile gradually turned cold, his face filled with scorn. "Since the Prime Minister insists, then I have no choice but to tell the truth. Seraphina Ainsworth recently had an illicit affair with someone. After I caught them, I had the adulterer executed. Afterward, Seraphina committed suicide for her lover. I was reluctant to tell the Prime Minister about such a sordid affair." Alaric shot up from his chair, his eyes wide and his face pale. What did you say? My Sera, she. Alaric was so overcome with grief that he couldn't say the word. In disbelief, he said, "I don't believe you, Ethan Hawthorne. What is your purpose in slandering my daughter's name?" Ethan sneered. "Absurd, I am a general of the court. What reason would I have to slander her name? Besides, after she did such a shameless thing, I would be trying to cover it up, not spread it. After all, she was still my wife." A sharp pain shot through Alaric's heart, and he tasted blood in his mouth. He suppressed his grief and glared at Ethan. "You say my daughter hanged herself. Do you have proof?" Ethan snorted and produced the suicide note he had prepared. "Prime Minister, please take a look. You wouldn't fail to recognize your daughter's handwriting, would you?" Alaric's fingers trembled as he opened the note. Every word and sentence did seem to be written by Seraphina, but he couldn't bring himself to believe it. He knew his daughter. Since she was young, she had been the most intelligent and dignified. How could she have an illicit affair? And how could she commit suicide for a guard? Alaric took a step back, his trembling finger pointing at Ethan. "It was you. You killed my daughter, Ethan Hawthorne. Give me back my daughter." Ethan was growing impatient, his voice rising slightly. "Prime Minister Ainsworth, don't press your luck. I have explained the matter clearly to you. Besides, to protect Seraphina's reputation, I have handled this matter discreetly. What more do you want?" Seeing Ethan's nonchalant expression, Alaric's chest ached with anger. He forgot himself for a moment and grabbed Ethan's clothes. "Ethan Hawthorne, I married my Sera to you, and now she has died under mysterious circumstances, yet you stand here spouting nonsense. Come with me. I want His Majesty to judge whether you royals can just kill people at will." Ethan's face turned ugly at these words. He tried to break free from Alaric, but found that in his grief and anger, Alaric's strength was immense. If he used force, he might injure the old Prime Minister. Although he had never liked the Prime Minister, he couldn't deny that he was an important official in the court. After some thought, Ethan felt that perhaps the only way was to go to the Great Hall and have his imperial brother resolve the matter, so Ethan spoke up. "Prime Minister, since you don't believe what I say, then let's go to the palace together and have His Majesty judge. How about that? But after this, you must not cause a scene at the general's estate again." Chapter 13. Causing a scene at the general's estate, Alaric said angrily, "Am I an unreasonable person? If my daughter is truly at fault, I swear I will never set foot in the general's estate again." "Very well. In that case, Prime Minister, let me go first. I need to change my clothes, lest I appear unkempt before the throne." Ethan said he was going to change clothes, but he actually took the opportunity to instruct his butler to bring the household servants and his concubine with them. Alaric didn't say much. simply getting into his carriage early and heading to the palace with Ethan. In the majestic Great Hall, the emperor sat on the dragon throne, looking down at the grim-faced Prime Minister Alaric and his beloved General Ethan. He couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. In fact, the emperor had already heard about the matter, but he had thought it was just a rumor. He hadn't expected Seraphina Ainsworth to actually be dead. The emperor sighed. "My two dear ministers, why have you brought your quarrel before the throne?" Alaric was the first to kneel, tears streaming down his face. "I beg your majesty to seek justice for me. My daughter, Seraphina Ainsworth, died under mysterious circumstances in the general's estate. I hope your majesty can help me investigate this matter thoroughly." The emperor's gaze fell on Ethan. "General, how do you explain this?" Ethan said righteously. "Your majesty, Seraphina Ainsworth's death was not mysterious. I have already explained the entire matter to the Prime Minister, but he seems not to believe me, which is why we are here." "Oh, Prime Minister, is what the general says true?" Alaric kowtowed, his voice filled with grief and anger. "Your majesty, the general has indeed explained, but I doubt what he says. Sera grew up by my side. She was clever and obedient. The only time she ever rebelled was when she begged me to ask for her marriage to the general. She was deeply in love with the general. How could she, as the general claims, be entangled with a guard?" Ethan sneered at Alaric's words. "Clever and obedient? She was a cruel and cunning woman." As Alaric spoke, tears streamed down his face again. "Your majesty, I know my daughter's character best. No matter what, she would never choose to take her own life. Therefore, I believe there must be a hidden story here. I implore your majesty to investigate." The emperor's brow furrowed. "General, do you have anything to say?" Ethan's gaze was clear, and he spoke calmly. "Of course, I have something to say. Everything I told the Prime Minister before is true, and I have already provided evidence. A so-called suicide note, which may or may not have been written by my daughter, is considered evidence." Simply absurd, Alaric flicked his sleeve in anger. Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Prime Minister, don't be so hasty. I didn't want this matter to become public knowledge, but since you insist on a thorough investigation, then I have some witnesses here. I hope your majesty will allow them to testify." The emperor granted his permission. Soon, several servants and maids were brought into the hall. The emperor pointed to one of the servants and said, "You, tell us how the mistress died." The servant knelt trembling before the emperor and stole a glance at Alaric. The mistress had an affair with her personal guard, Leo Kane. After being discovered, she took her own life. Utter nonsense. Alaric's face turned livid. "Your majesty, the servants of the general's estate will naturally side with the general." Chapter 14. Utter nonsense. In that case, how about I bring in a witness that everyone will find convincing? Ethan gave an order, and soon, a graceful figure appeared in the hall. It was Ivy Blackwood. "I greet your majesty, and I greet the general." After bowing to each of them, Ivy softly called out to Alaric, "Godfather." "Ivy, what are you doing here?" Alaric was somewhat surprised. Although Ivy was now Ethan's concubine, she was still his goddaughter. And it was Sera who had insisted he adopt her as his goddaughter all those years ago. Ivy lowered her head. Ethan spoke up. "The Prime Minister doesn't trust the servants of my estate, does he? Then surely the Prime Minister wouldn't distrust his own goddaughter. Ivy, tell the Prime Minister how your dear sister died." Ivy seemed somewhat ashamed, as if the words were difficult to say. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "My sister had an affair with her guard. After being discovered by the general, she took her own life." "Ivy, you?" Alaric's eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at the treacherous Ivy. "Have you forgotten that you are a member of the Ainsworth family?" Ivy looked aggrieved. "Godfather, I am only speaking the truth. Besides, I would not dare to deceive the monarch." Alaric clutched his chest, momentarily speechless with anger. The emperor sighed at the scene. "Prime Minister, since the matter is clear, you need not grieve too much. Besides, if this were to spread, it would damage the royal family's dignity. I think we should handle it as the general did before." "I thank your majesty for your wisdom." Ethan raised an eyebrow, but did not press his advantage. Alaric, however, seemed to have aged several years in an instant, standing there dejectedly. "Your majesty, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave." The emperor waved his hand, somewhat troubled. This beloved general of his was quite a troublemaker, but he still had to clean up the mess. The task of placating the Prime Minister fell to the Emperor. Ethan had successfully dealt with the Prime Minister, and he was quite pleased. If the Prime Minister hadn't forced the issue back then, how would he have ended up marrying that Seraphina Ainsworth? And now, he was finally free of them all. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. After returning to the general's estate, the first thing he did was order fine wine and food, intending to celebrate properly. Ivy followed obediently behind him. Thinking of what had just happened, Ethan couldn't help but praise her. Today, the matter was resolved smoothly, thanks to you. Ivy pursed her lips. I wouldn't dare, I was only speaking the truth. Ethan was taken aback for a moment, then pointed to Ivy, asking her to stay. Ivy was overjoyed. Soon, the fine wine and food were laid out. Ethan held his wine cup and drank, one mouthful after another. It was unclear whether it was out of genuine happiness or for some other reason. Seeing this, Ivy didn't try to stop him. Her eyes held a hint of calculation, as she tried to gauge when Ethan would get drunk. Ivy gently and attentively refilled Ethan's cup, watching him down it glass after glass. His charming, deep eyes gradually became hazy with drunkenness. General, General, Ivy cautiously called his name and moved closer. Seeing that he didn't push her away as he usually did, she was overjoyed. Chapter 15. General, you're drunk. Ivy took the initiative to wrap her arms around Ethan's, testing the waters. General, you're drunk. Ethan suddenly flipped over, pinning Ivy beneath him. His wine-scented lips covered her neck, sending a shiver through her. A blush rose on her charming face, and her jade-like hands took the initiative to wrap around him, moaning as if in a trance, General, General. In his drunken haze, Ethan tore open Ivy's clothes. The smooth touch was irresistible, and Ivy let out a low, ambiguous moan. Ivy responded to Ethan's kisses with equal passion, her face flushed with shyness. If she could spend a night of passion with Ethan today, she might be able to conceive a child, and her position in this estate would be more secure. Ethan's breathing became hotter and more rapid. A faint red light flashed in his eyes, and he felt an unbearable surge of desire. Daisy, Daisy, Ethan pressed down on the woman beneath him, wishing he could merge her into his very bones, calling out the name of his beloved. Ivy's body stiffened, and a flash of anger appeared in her eyes. She suddenly raised her hand to stop Ethan. General, I am Ivy, not Daisy. Ethan abruptly stopped. The passion that had been in his eyes was gone. Ivy's heart skipped a beat. She was about to try to remedy the situation when she saw Ethan push her away with a look of disinterest and get off the bed. Ivy grew anxious and grabbed Ethan's sleeve. General, it was my fault. Ethan's gaze was clear with a hint of boredom. Enough for today, there's no point in saying more. You should rest early. With that, Ethan stood up and left without a second thought, completely ignoring Ivy's soft sobs. The cool wind outside sobered Ethan up a little more. He stood in the darkness for a moment before heading straight back to his own room. As soon as he entered, he saw the wooden chest Daisy had left behind. Thinking of what he had seen earlier, he felt an immense sense of frustration. He wanted to burn the manuscripts, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Ethan decided to calm down and sit down to read Daisy's manuscripts. The more he read, the more shocked he became. The manuscripts detailed Daisy's life in the Prime Minister's estate. She and Seraphina were like sisters. Because Seraphina disliked being constrained and had no interest in arts, literature, or needlework, she often swapped identities with Daisy, using human skin masks they had made of each other. Since they were similar in height and build and knew each other very well, not even the Prime Minister had ever noticed anything amiss, let alone ordinary people. Daisy acted as Seraphina in the Prime Minister's estate, studying arts and literature. Because she came from a humble background, she was very fortunate to be able to learn these things. Even for needlework, they had a teaching matron from the palace. Daisy wrote in her manuscript that she didn't understand why the young miss was so averse to these things. As a high-born lady, wasn't this what she was supposed to learn? But thanks to her young miss's dislike for these things, she had been able to take advantage of the situation. And while Daisy was playing the part of a high-born lady in the Prime Minister's estate, the real young miss, Seraphina, was out playing, disguised as the handmaiden Daisy. Seraphina had always longed for freedom. When she was young, she had dreamed of becoming a female warrior, roaming the world. Although that dream never came true, the seed of longing for freedom had been planted in her heart. Ethan's expression was complicated, and his heart inexplicably tightened. He had a vague feeling that the truth of the matter was about to be revealed. Chapter 16. Stunned, Ethan composed himself and continued reading. Having learned the arts and literature, Daisy became more and more outstanding. By chance, she met her lover, Hugo Thorne, and her heart was lost to him from then on. At first, she felt unworthy of Hugo, but it was Serafina who encouraged her and gave her the courage to pursue him. To help her, Serafina often covered for her so she could go out and meet Hugo in secret. When Ethan read this, his heart felt as if it had been stabbed, and his mind felt as if it had been struck by lightning. He was completely stunned. Ethan stood up instinctively. He didn't know what he was doing, only that he felt cold all over. His fingers even trembled unconsciously, perhaps from the alcohol. He stood there in a daze for a long time before he seemed to come to his senses and continued reading, word by word. The following manuscripts were somewhat disorganized, clearly indicating the inner turmoil of the writer, Daisy. The manuscript said that while she was meeting Hugo in secret, she was unexpectedly seen by Ivy Blackwood. So Ivy found her and threatened that if she didn't obey, she would have Hugo killed. Daisy was terrified. She didn't know what to do. The manuscript expressed her inner conflict and pain. She didn't want to betray Serafina because Serafina had been so good to her, but she also didn't want Hugo to be harmed because of this. He was, after all, the man she loved most. Under duress, Daisy chose to compromise. She agreed to Ivy's demands and betrayed Serafina. Daisy wrote in the manuscript, "Miss, I'm sorry, I truly have no choice. I can't let anything happen to Hugo. I know I have failed you. I will repay you in the next life, even if I have to be a beast of burden." Ethan was shocked and enraged. His vision blurred, and in a daze, he seemed to see Serafina's face, looking at him with deep sorrow. Ethan shook his head, steadied himself, and gritted his teeth as he continued reading. After that, under Ivy's coercion, Daisy told her everything about Serafina, even swapping the real dagger for a fake one. And all this time, Serafina was kept in the dark. Daisy was constantly on edge, worried that she would be exposed at any moment. But Serafina, with her carefree nature and absolute trust in her, never suspected a thing. Gradually, Daisy began to relax. However, just as Serafina was preparing to meet Ethan, Ivy devised a plan to have Daisy leave the Prime Minister's estate, and then told Ethan that Daisy had been killed by Serafina. Ethan staggered. He recalled the things Ivy had said when she had suddenly come to see him, and they matched what Daisy had recorded perfectly, so it turned out that this was all a setup in his days. He had become the prey in someone else's game. Ethan laughed in anger, clutching the manuscripts for a long time without speaking, the taste of blood in his mouth. He had never known that the Daisy he had longed for was, from beginning to end, a pawn, a traitor who had sold out her mistress for the sake of the man she loved. She would even disregard her years of sisterly affection for Serafina. How laughable, how pathetic, and how tragic. Chapter 17. Vicious beauty. A storm raged in Ethan's eyes, the joints of his fingers jutting out from the force of his grip. Ivy Blackwood, what a vicious beauty. He had always considered himself clever, yet he had been played by a woman. Ethan was completely sober now. He stood up abruptly, wanting to go and question Ivy, but his years of discipline made him calm down and reread Daisy's manuscripts. However, there were no entries for the next 2 years. Ethan's brow furrowed. Just as he was feeling strange, he suddenly saw a manuscript at the bottom of the blank pages. This was a manuscript written a few days ago, when Daisy had been brought back to the estate by Ivy, and it seemed to be Daisy's last entry before her death. The manuscript read, "I betrayed my miss before, and I thought I could get away with it, but I was imprisoned by Ivy Blackwood. I know my sins are deep. Now I have been brought back, but my mind is hazy, and I don't know if I will remember these things in the future, so I am secretly writing this down now. Ivy Blackwood is jealous of my miss. She framed my miss before, and now that she has brought me back, she must be planning to harm my miss again. Miss, you must be careful, but I am too ashamed to face you. I'm afraid I won't have the chance to tell you everything. I regret it now, but it's too late." The words were written in blood and tears, full of genuine emotion, moving the reader's heart. And at the end of this manuscript, Daisy mentioned Ethan. She hoped that Ethan could believe Seraphina, because she was the one he truly loved. After reading the manuscript, Ethan was utterly astonished. He sat there, motionless, as if he hadn't come to his senses for a long time. He closed his eyes slightly, and suddenly remembered the way Seraphina had said she was Daisy, so wronged and resolute. But because of his preconceived notions, he had never believed Seraphina. Ethan felt a strange sense of regret in his heart. However, due to his nature, he didn't fully believe it yet. There were some things he preferred to investigate himself. Ethan immediately put away the items, gathered his men, and prepared to set out that night. At that moment, Ivy Blackwood, already dressed, suddenly appeared before him. She was shocked by his actions and immediately asked with concern, "General, where are you going so late?" Ethan sat on his horse, looking down at Ivy. Although he didn't fully believe the manuscript yet, he couldn't muster any good feelings for this woman. "Ivy Blackwood, remember your place. Do I need to report my whereabouts to you?" Ivy looked aggrieved. "General, I am only worried about you. You just drank a lot of wine. I have already had someone prepare a sobering soup. It wouldn't be too late to leave after you've had it." Ethan snorted. "Don't be nosy." With that, Ethan and his men spurred their horses and rode away. Ivy stood at the gate, watching his departing figure, and bit her lips so hard she could have drawn blood. The group rode out of the city. The place Ethan was heading to was becoming more and more desolate. The few guards he had brought with him exchanged glances, puzzled. Where on earth was the general going in the middle of the night? Just as they were feeling confused, they heard Ethan speak. "Do any of you know where the potter's field outside the city is?" One of them stepped forward. "I know." "Good, you lead the way." Chapter 18. The stench of corpses. The guard took the lead, with Ethan close behind, and the others followed without a word. Fortunately, these guards were all handpicked by Ethan, so they weren't afraid of coming to a potter's field in the middle of the night. At most, they just found the place a bit unsettling. Soon, Ethan and his men arrived at the potter's field. In the darkness, it was eerily quiet. Bodies were scattered everywhere, some slightly better off, wrapped in a mat. They all dismounted, and the stench of corpses hit them. The guards couldn't help but turn pale. Even if they weren't afraid of this place, the smell was truly unbearable. "Find her for me." The men looked at each other, completely unsure of what they were looking for. Fortunately, Ethan quickly described the body they were searching for. They were looking for a woman in a long red dress. The guards couldn't help but wonder what the general was doing looking for a dead body. He couldn't possibly be bored. Regardless of what Ethan was thinking, the guards followed his orders and searched carefully. But in a place like a potter's field, there were so many bodies, and it was night. Even with torches, finding a specific body was very difficult. But to the guards' surprise, Ethan himself, ignoring the overwhelming stench, began searching among the bodies. Suddenly, a guard shouted, "Found her, found her." Ethan walked over. The first thing he saw was the familiar dress, but when he looked at the body's face, it was a gruesome sight. The face and body had been pecked away by vultures. Ethan stood there, looking at Seraphina's current state, and felt a pang of pain in his heart. He stood there for a long time, and the guards, seeing this, didn't dare to approach him. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan seemed to come to his senses and said to the guards, "Go and buy a coffin. Place this body inside." The guards did as they were told. After that, Ethan had them carry the coffin to another cemetery. Ethan had the already buried Daisy's coffin opened as well. The two bodies were placed side by side, and then Ethan stood before them, examining them carefully. The guards, who had been up all night, felt that the general must have gone a little mad. Why else would he be exhuming bodies for an autopsy in the middle of the night? And if they remembered correctly, both of these women had come from the general's estate. Regardless of what the guards thought, Ethan's face grew more and more solemn as he looked at the two bodies. Countless thoughts raced through his mind, and he became more and more convinced that Seraphina was the girl he remembered, the one he had met in secret. But now, this woman's body was no longer intact, and it was all his fault. Ethan felt a dull ache in his chest, as if he had been struck by a heavy hammer. He knelt, tears falling on the body, and fell to his knees with a thud. "I'm sorry, Sira, I'm sorry." The guards were shocked to hear this. The general seemed to be calling the mistress's name. But wasn't the mistress buried in the imperial mausoleum after dying of illness? Why would she be in a potter's field? They had seen for themselves how sordid the royal family could be. Ethan knelt for a whole night. It wasn't until near dawn that a guard stepped forward and said, "General, you've been kneeling all night. Please restrain your grief." "It's only one night. I would rather be the one lying here." The guard added, "But General, the dead should be laid to rest. Won't your actions prevent the deceased from finding peace?" Chapter 19. A grand burial. Ethan seemed to suddenly come to his senses. Yes, laid to rest. Someone go and buy the finest coffin, prepare a funeral. I want to give Sira a grand reburial. Ethan gave the order, and soon the guards began to make arrangements. After some thought, Ethan went to the Prime Minister's estate. Since the confrontation with Ethan in the palace had failed, Alaric Ainsworth had fallen ill upon returning home. The loss of his daughter had devastated him, and coupled with his old age, he was bedridden the next day, even taking leave from the morning court session. As Alaric was grieving for his daughter, a servant came to report that Ethan had arrived. Alaric was furious. "Throw him out the doors of my Ainsworth estate will never be open to him." The servant who had come to report stood there trembling, somewhat intimidated. That was the general, after all, not someone they could afford to offend. Seeing this, Alaric angrily threw the medicine bowl in his hand at the servant. "What? Am I so ill that I can't even command you anymore? You are servants of the Prime Minister's estate. I will bear the consequences of any actions." Only then did the servant run out and say to Ethan, who was still standing respectfully at the gate, "General, the Prime Minister is unwell and is not seeing visitors at the moment. Please return." Ethan did not retreat. Instead, he knelt outside the Prime Minister's estate. The servant was shocked. He heard Ethan say, "Please go and report again. Say that I have come to invite the Prime Minister to see his wife off. I will be holding a funeral for her in 3 days." The servant relayed Ethan's words to Alaric. Alaric burst into tears, covering his eyes and sighing loudly, "Sira, my Sira is gone, gone forever." As he was in pain, the door was pushed open with a creak, and his current wife, Ivy Blackwood's godmother, Eleanor Vance, walked in. It was rumored that although Eleanor was Ivy's godmother, Ivy's deceased biological mother was Eleanor's older sister. Therefore, their relationship was no different from that of a biological mother and daughter. And Eleanor had been a concubine who had been promoted. She hated Seraphina's mother to the bone. Alaric's face darkened. "What are you doing here?" Since Ivy had betrayed them in the Great Hall by siding with Ethan, Alaric had realized that perhaps this Eleanor was not as kind and gentle as she seemed. After all, her goddaughter Ivy was very close to her. If she were a good person, how could Ivy have done such a thing? Eleanor lowered her eyes, a flash of displeasure quickly disappearing. Her voice was soft. "My lord, I know you are in a bad mood, but Ethan Hawthorne is a general after all. For a general to be kneeling outside our Prime Minister's estate, if people were to see, it would inevitably lead to gossip about you." Alaric found some sense in her words. He thought for a moment. "Then tell him to get lost. I don't want to see him right now." Eleanor then said, "In that case, why don't I invite him into the estate? After all, Ivy is still his concubine. I haven't seen Ivy in a long time and I miss her. I know you resent Ivy for helping the general in the hall, but my lord, a woman must follow her husband. If Ivy didn't do that, how would she survive in the general's estate?" Eleanor paused, dabbing the corner of her eye with a handkerchief. "Besides, Seraphina is your daughter, but isn't Ivy your daughter too? Now that Sira is gone, are you going to abandon your other daughter as well?" Chapter 20. Silent complaint. Alaric's face turned cold. "When did I say I was going to abandon Ivy? But what you're doing now is no different from abandoning her." Alaric raised his hand in frustration. "Fine, do as you say." Only then did Eleanor leave with satisfaction. She personally invited Ethan into the Prime Minister's estate. However, Ethan seemed to have nothing to say to her. After a few perfunctory words, he announced his departure. Watching Ethan leave, Eleanor quickly sent someone to inform Ivy at the general's estate. In the general's estate, Ivy was restlessly admiring the flowers in the garden. When she came to her senses, the potted plant in front of her was almost completely stripped, its leaves scattered on the ground. Her head maid, Rosella, was quite worried. "Miss, what's wrong? You're so restless." "Rosella, I don't know why, but I feel uneasy. Where could the general have gone in the middle of the night? And he still hasn't returned." "Is it because you miss the general, miss?" Ivy shot Rosella an annoyed glance. What nonsense are you talking about? I just find it strange. The general's attitude changed too quickly. Could he be angry with me? What Ivy was really worried about was whether Ethan had discovered something. But then again, now that Seraphina was dead and Daisy was dead, everyone who knew the truth had turned to dust. What did she have to fear? As they were talking, a young maid came to report that someone from the Prime Minister's estate had arrived and was looking for Ivy. Hearing the visitor's name, Ivy's heart skipped a beat. She knew it was someone sent by her godmother. She quickly invited the person into her room. From the visitor, she learned what Ethan had done. Ivy's brow furrowed, and she was utterly bewildered. She found the whole thing very strange. Why would the general suddenly want to rebury Seraphina for no reason? Rosella, be on your guard for the next few days. I always have a bad feeling. The general is becoming more and more difficult to understand. Rosella couldn't help but speak up. Miss, if you can't understand, why don't you just ask? You and the general are husband and wife. Is there anything you can't ask? Ivy was stunned. Although Rosella's words were a bit biased, they weren't entirely wrong. Perhaps she could try to get the answers she wanted from Ethan himself. Rosella, keep an eye out for when the general returns. If he does, go and invite him to my place. I want to cook for him myself, to make something to nourish him. Rosella naturally agreed, but for 3 whole days, Ethan didn't show his face. During these days, he stayed by Seraphina's coffin like a devout mourner, wanting to see her off on her final journey. He spoke a lot to Seraphina, as if trying to make up for all the time they had lost. On the day of the funeral, Ethan personally carried Seraphina's coffin. The old Prime Minister, Alaric, had dragged his ailing body there. The moment he saw his daughter being buried, he broke down in tears. After the funeral, Ethan returned to the general's estate. Meanwhile, Ivy was applying makeup in front of a mirror when Rosella rushed in. Miss, the general is back, is he? Quick, go and invite the general over. Rosella left to do as she was told, while Ivy looked at her reflection in the bronze mirror and smiled with confidence. Chapter 21. Resourceful and influential soon, Ethan arrived at Ivy's room, where she had already prepared wine and food. General, you don't look well. Are you feeling unwell? You must take care of yourself. You are the pillar of this estate. If you don't take care of yourself, what will become of us? Ethan shot her a cold glance, ignoring her concern. Did you specifically call me over just to say this? Of course not, General. I had a dream yesterday. I dreamt of my sister, Sierra. Ethan cut her off with a cold laugh. You certainly should be dreaming of her. Ivy was taken aback, her face a little awkward, but she continued, My sister and I were always close. Although I am saddened that she did wrong, we were still good sisters. I dreamt that she asked me to take good care of you, General, and I naturally agreed. Listening to Ivy, Ethan grew more and more annoyed. He knew full well what she was getting at. She had undoubtedly heard about him burying Sierra, and he was surprised at how resourceful and influential Ivy was to get news so quickly. Ethan looked at Ivy coldly. What are you trying to say? Only then did Ivy speak timidly. General, I heard that you personally reburied my sister yesterday. I would like to go and pay my respects, but I don't know where she is buried now. Ethan, however, became agitated and grabbed Ivy's chin, his eyes filled with a cold light. He didn't answer her question, but instead asked directly, Ivy Blackwood, what are you trying to find out? Ivy's eyes darted away. General, please calm down. I don't care what you want to know. I only want to ask you one thing now. What was going on between you and Daisy? Ivy's body stiffened for a moment, but she quickly recovered. However, the guilt in her eyes was caught by Ethan. Ivy lowered her gaze, pretending to know nothing. General, there has never been anything between me and Daisy. Daisy was my sister's handmaiden. How could she have any connection with me? Ethan sneered, his grip on Ivy's chin tightening. Ivy felt a sharp pain and tears welled up in her eyes. General, I really don't know. What is it that you want to ask? General, it hurts. Ethan suddenly let her go, his eyes turning even colder. I gave you a chance, and you didn't take it. Don't regret it later. Ivy staggered and fell into a chair, while Ethan flicked his sleeve and left. The table of delicious food, untouched, now seemed to mock Ivy's intentions. Rosella rushed forward. Miss, are you all right? Should I get a doctor to take a look? Ivy, however, seemed to suddenly come to her senses and grabbed Rosella. "Rosella, what should I do now? The general, he knows." Rosella was confused. Although she was Ivy's head maid, she was not aware of certain matters. Ivy also suddenly calmed down, sitting there with lingering fear. She had almost let the secret slip. Although she trusted Rosella, she was unwilling to let anyone else know about this matter. After all, the more people who knew, the more likely her secret would be exposed. Chapter 22. Private matters. After leaving the general's estate, Ethan went straight to the palace. Hugo Thorne was an imperial guard, and although he had a residence outside, he spent most of his time in the palace. When Ethan arrived, Hugo was practicing with his sword in the courtyard. He was surprised to see Ethan and quickly bowed his head in salute. "I greet the general." Ethan stood there, his feelings complicated. He suddenly felt a sense of trepidation, unsure whether he should continue to seek confirmation about Daisy. As long as Ethan didn't speak, Hugo kept his head bowed. He was puzzled. He had never had any dealings with the general, so he wondered why the general had suddenly come to his courtyard. Just as Hugo's mind was wandering, Ethan spoke. "Rise." Hugo stood up straight. "General, may I know why you are looking for me? If you have any orders, you could have just sent a messenger. There was no need to trouble yourself to come in person." Ethan shook his head. "Actually, I have come today for a private matter." "Thorne, do you know a woman named Daisy?" Hugo was overjoyed. He even stepped forward, disregarding protocol. "General, you know Daisy? Then do you know where she is now? I haven't seen her in over 2 years." Hearing this, Ethan had a bad feeling. Based on Hugo's words, it seemed he had indeed been deceived. Seeing Ethan's silence, Hugo said anxiously, "General, I implore you to tell me about Daisy." Ethan hesitated. "Before I tell you, shouldn't you tell me about you and Daisy?" Only then did Hugo speak, somewhat embarrassed. "There's really not much to tell. At first, I didn't pay much attention to her, but later, I started receiving gifts. Upon investigation, I found that they were being sent from the Prime Minister's estate." As Hugo spoke, he seemed to recall the happy times of the past, a faint ripple in his eyes. "Later, Daisy took the initiative to seek me out, and I fell in love with her at first sight. We pledged our love to each other, but due to our statuses, we had to be patient. During this time, the young miss of the Prime Minister's estate often helped Daisy, so I was very grateful to her as well." Ethan was surprised. "You knew?" Hugo replied. "What do you mean, General? If you're referring to the matter of Daisy and the young miss swapping identities, of course I knew. I once ran into the young miss on the street and mistook her for Daisy. She then told me her identity. Later, Daisy also told me that Miss Ainsworth was truly extraordinary. She didn't seem to care for the usual arts and literature that other ladies pursued, but was instead very interested in medicine." Hugo's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over Ethan's head. His voice trembled. "Is what you're saying true? I would not dare to lie before the general. It is true." Ethan's heart felt as if it were being pierced by needles, and his face turned grim. Hugo, seeing this, looked up at Ethan, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw his expression. "General, do you know where Daisy is?" Ethan was silent for a long time. Seeing this, Hugo's face also grew grim. "Is it inconvenient to say? She has passed away from illness." Hugo was shocked. "Passed away? How is that possible?" Chapter 23. A suspicious death. Seeing his sorrowful expression, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy. His beloved had also died, but she had been killed by his own hands. Hugo pressed on. "How did Daisy die? Even if she died of illness, what illness was it? Why didn't she tell me anything?" Hugo's questioning left Ethan at a loss. He closed his eyes, suppressing the bitterness in his heart. "I will give you an explanation for this matter." Hearing this, Hugo vaguely sensed that Daisy's death was suspicious. His expression darkened, and when he spoke again, his voice was somewhat hoarse. "Then can you give me Daisy's body? I want to take her back for burial. I once promised her that if she died before me, I would bury her in the Thorne family ancestral grave, making her my rightful wife." Hugo's request was reasonable, and Ethan agreed. After leaving the palace, Ethan's heart was filled with grief. He deeply regretted his foolishness. If he hadn't been so quick to believe others, Seraphina would not have died. He could still remember her desperate expression when he had wrongly accused her. The thought of it made him want to cut himself into 1,000 pieces to atone for his sin. But it was all too late. Ethan returned to the general's estate in a daze. Ivy, having received the news early, came out to greet him. "General, you're back?" Before Ivy could finish, Ethan suddenly kicked her, sending her flying to the side. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Rosella, who was beside Ivy, screamed in terror and fell to her knees, trembling, not daring to lift her head. Ivy was completely stunned. She struggled to her feet, her face filled with terror. "General, were you angered by something outside?" Ethan looked down at Ivy, finding it hard to believe that such a woman, who appeared so gentle, weak, and beautiful, could have such a venomous heart. Ethan slowly walked over, his foot pressing down on Ivy's chest, causing her to cough repeatedly. He was enraged like a furious lion. He stared at Ivy. "I know everything now. Tell me what happened to Sierra. And what about the dagger?" Ivy coughed incessantly, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Coupled with her tearful expression, she looked pitiful. Unfortunately, Ethan was in a rage, and what he had heard from Hugo had filled his heart with pain. "General, I really don't know what you're talking about." "You don't know?" Ethan grabbed Ivy's hair, his eyes filled with hatred. This woman really wouldn't shed a tear until she saw her coffin. Did she think a simple, "I don't know," could erase everything? Ethan lowered his voice, his eyes filled with a bloodthirsty light. "You really don't know? In that case, how about I tell you? It probably started when you accidentally discovered Daisy meeting her lover, Hugo Thorne, in secret, right? Why don't you tell me how you then decided to use Daisy, and how you swapped Sierra's dagger, giving me a fake one?" Chapter 24. Going to die as Ethan's words fell, so did his ruthless fists. Soon, the once beautiful Ivy was bruised and swollen, her body limp on the ground like a broken doll. She wanted to beg for mercy, but she was in too much pain to speak. Rosella had long been frozen with fear. She didn't understand why her master, who had always been so favored, would suddenly be beaten so brutally. And how could Ethan be so cruel? Bright red blood flowed from Ivy's nose and ears, a shocking sight. Rosella gritted her teeth and threw herself forward. "General, stop. If you keep hitting her, she'll die." "Die? Hess, all the better. That way my Sierra won't be lonely in the afterlife." Ethan's words made Ivy realize that things were not looking good. In fact, from his previous words, she had already guessed that he knew everything. This was a terrible situation. She couldn't die. She had worked so hard to get to this point, to finally get everything she wanted. How could she die now? Ivy used all her strength to grab Ethan's leg. She struggled to look up, her blood-streaked face contorted in a grimace. "General, everything I did for you," Ivy shouted. "From the first time I saw you, General, I fell in love with you. But in your eyes, there was only ever Seraphina Ainsworth. Even before we were married, she outshone me in every way. And now she was going to steal my marriage from me. I couldn't accept it." Ivy was hysterical. "Why, General? I love you so much. Why can't I compare to a woman like Seraphina, who is not even a proper lady? She even swaps identities with her handmaiden. It's ridiculous. How could such a person be worthy of you? So you devised a venomous plan and had her killed, and you made me do it with my own hands." Ethan was heartbroken. In the end, if it weren't for him, perhaps Seraphina would not have died. He was, after all, the one who had directly killed her. Ivy cried out in sorrow. "I didn't want to, but what choice did I have? She is the Prime Minister's daughter, and I am only his goddaughter. If I didn't plan for myself, how could I have entered this general's estate?" Ethan sneered. "Truly ridiculous, Ivy Blackwood. Don't you find yourself disgusting? Don't say you did all this because you love me. You are merely using love as a cloak to commit your cruel deeds." With that, Ethan kicked Ivy away. She finally succumbed and fainted. Rosella, who was kneeling nearby, was also trembling. Ethan didn't bother with a servant. After venting his anger, his expression became even colder. "Men, lock Ivy Blackwood in the woodshed. Do not let her out without my order." Ethan had dealt with Ivy, but his heart still felt empty. He walked into the courtyard where Seraphina had lived. It was as cold and desolate as ever. Ethan wanted to find some of Seraphina's belongings, but he suddenly realized that he had been too cruel when he had dealt with her. Everything related to her had been thrown away. Retribution, this must be retribution. Ethan covered his eyes, and hot tears streamed through his fingers. He had finally tasted the bitterness, and it was his own doing. Chapter 25. Sierra, I was wrong. Ethan got blind drunk. In his haze, he seemed to see Seraphina standing before him, smiling beautifully. Daisy. No, it's Sierra. Sierra. Ethan was in a daze. He saw Seraphina carrying a bamboo basket, turning to smile at him, and then gradually walking away. He cried out in pain, "Don't go, Sira, I was wrong, I know I was wrong. Can you stay?" But gradually, Serafina's face was replaced by the disfigured female corpse from the potter's field. Ethan was in agony, filled with regret. Ethan drank day and night, as if only when he was drunk could he see his beloved woman. In his stupor, he unknowingly came to the Prime Minister's estate and began to pound on the door. The servant who came to open the door was shocked and confused. Why was this famous general here again? Just as he was about to close the door and go to report, Ethan suddenly burst in. "Sira is here, isn't she? I knew she had returned. Is she avoiding me? Let me in, I want to see Sira." Hearing the commotion outside, the Prime Minister, Alaric, who had just recovered from his illness, frowned. "What's all the noise about?" Soon, a servant came to report that Ethan had had a few drinks and was blocking the gate, though it was unclear what he wanted. "It's Ethan Hawthorne again. He's gone too far. Does he think there's no one in my Prime Minister's estate?" Alaric went out in a rage and saw Ethan making a drunken scene in his courtyard. "Men, throw Ethan Hawthorne out." The servants immediately did as they were told. After all, it wasn't the first time. Besides, the general looked like he was just drunk. He probably wouldn't remember this when he sobered up. And so, Ethan was thrown out of the Prime Minister's estate. This matter soon reached the ears of the emperor. That same day, Ethan was summoned to the palace. Looking at Ethan's dejected state, the emperor couldn't help but sigh. "My dear general, I have heard about what happened, but since it has come to this, you can't keep dwelling on the past. In the end, you were only deceived by a villain, which is why you made such a grave mistake." Ethan raised his eyes and looked at the emperor. "Your Majesty, you don't understand. I killed her with my own hands. I truly don't understand why I became so foolish. Sira told me her identity time and time again, but I never believed her." The emperor was also moved by his words. "Do you want me to punish the culprit for you?" "No need. I can handle this matter myself. It will be my own atonement." "Very well. Then from now on, you must not drink without restraint. The Prime Minister has already submitted a complaint against you. I am in a difficult position." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will not bother the Prime Minister again." With Ethan's promise, the emperor was somewhat relieved. But the emperor did not expect that Ethan would indeed not go to the Prime Minister's estate again, because he had simply changed his location. He came to Serafina's grave, knelt before it, and played the flute for her. The sound was mournful, and Ethan's tears fell with the music, again and again, wetting the bamboo flute. Ethan repeatedly apologized to Serafina in his heart, but he knew very well that no matter how much he apologized, she would not come back. Chapter 26. Dejection. Ethan was so distraught that he could barely play. He sat by Serafina's grave day and night, as if possessed, doing nothing but drinking and playing the flute, looking utterly dejected. Tiberius was the old butler of the estate. He had practically watched Ethan grow up. Now, seeing him treat himself this way, he felt terrible. One day, Tiberius brought some food to Serafina's grave. As expected, Ethan was still there. He had lost a lot of weight from only drinking, his unkempt hair was messy, and his handsome face was covered with a beard, making him look like a beggar on the street. "General, please eat something. Your body can't take this. Even if the mistress were here, she wouldn't want to see you destroying yourself like this." Tiberius pleaded, but Ethan seemed to have completely lost his hearing, not taking in a single word. He was in so much pain that every day he lived was a form of torture. Sometimes Ethan would think that perhaps this was heaven's punishment for him, for being so blind and gullible, for not even recognizing his own beloved. "Butler, you can go back first. I'm fine. I want to stay here alone for a while. But I know what I'm doing. Besides, I'm atoning for my sins. How can I just leave?" After speaking, Ethan picked up the flute again and began to play slowly. The mournful and lingering melody was so sad that even an old man like Tiberius couldn't help but shed tears. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, vast and distant, with fluffy white clouds drifting lazily by. This was a secluded valley. From a distance, it seemed to be shrouded in a green veil of trees. Nearby, a clear stream gurgled, its bottom visible, dotted with wildflowers. Warm sunlight shone into a bamboo hut by the stream. Inside the clean and tidy hut, an elegant man gently wiped the forehead of the woman on the bed. This woman was none other than the deceased Serafina Ainsworth. Serafina was not sleeping peacefully. Her brow was furrowed as if she were having a nightmare. The man sighed and placed the warm towel back on her forehead. The warmth seemed to calm her down. At the same time, her butterfly wing-like eyelashes fluttered, and she slowly opened her eyes. Serafina was still a little dazed, but when her eyes met the person before her, her senses instantly returned. She blinked, somewhat in disbelief. "Brother Quentin? Sira, you're finally awake. Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere?" Serafina was still confused. Quentin Shaw was the captain of the guards at the Prime Minister's estate and the older brother she had grown up with. But hadn't she died? Could it be that her soul couldn't let go of her father and brother Quentin, so she had returned to the Prime Minister's estate? But soon, Serafina dismissed this idea, because she realized this was not the Prime Minister's estate. Seeing Serafina lost in thought, Quentin didn't rush her, just waited quietly. They had waited so long already, a little longer wouldn't matter. After a long while, Serafina finally came to her senses. "Brother Quentin, didn't I? Why am I here?" Chapter 27. No need to blame yourself. As soon as Serafina finished speaking, Quentin's expression darkened, with a hint of anger. "Sira, actually, ever since you married into the general's estate, I have secretly had experts protecting you. You have always been simple and kind. You have no idea how cruel people in this world can be." Serafina said in a low voice, "No wonder I often felt someone watching me at the general's estate. At first, I thought it was the estate's secret guards, but it was you, Brother Quentin, thank you." Quentin gently brushed a strand of hair from her ear, his eyes full of deep affection. "Between you and me, there is no need for thanks." Serafina was silent for a moment, then she heard Quentin say, "I never thought Ethan Hawthorne would treat you like that. In fact, when you were framed and about to be drowned in a cage, I was prepared to take you away. But then the general's guards noticed something was wrong, and we fought, so I had to give up for the time being. I haven't seen you since. I was imprisoned in the estate during that time. It's normal that you couldn't see me, Brother Quentin. It's all my fault for hesitating, which caused you to suffer so much later. It has nothing to do with you, Brother Quentin. It's not your fault. You don't need to blame yourself." Serafina's clear eyes were full of determination. "Speaking of which, I still don't know how I escaped." Quentin explained, "It was a feigned death potion. The servant who made you drink the poisoned wine was someone I had placed in the general's estate. The poisoned wine had already been replaced with a feigned death potion. After you were thrown out of the general's estate, I brought you here." As for where Serafina was thrown, they both knew, so there was no need to ask. For a moment, the atmosphere in the bamboo hut became heavy. Quentin hated his own powerlessness, while Serafina was filled with hatred. "Brother Quentin, Ethan Hawthorne is a suspicious person. He might discover something is wrong in the future." "He won't. I had someone find a body and put your clothes on it. Ethan Hawthorne won't find out." Serafina nodded. "What time is it now? How long have I been asleep?" Hearing this, Quentin looked worried. "You've been asleep for a month. You were supposed to wake up in 3 days, but your heart was too full of resentment, and you were unwilling to wake up. It's only now that you've finally been reborn." "I'm sorry," Serafina lowered her eyes. She had always been an optimistic person, but this time she had been hurt too deeply. Serafina thought of the events before her death, and her eyes filled with hatred. She really didn't understand why a person's feelings could be so fragile. Just because a token of love was swapped, he lost all basic trust. Quentin reached out and stroked her hair. "Sira, don't apologize to me. Your waking up is the greatest gift heaven has given me. But you must also promise me that from now on, you will not give up on life so easily." Serafina nodded solemnly. Her life had been stolen back, so she naturally couldn't give it up so easily. Besides, she had to stay alive to take revenge on that Ethan Hawthorne. "Brother Quentin, can you continue to teach me martial arts?" Quentin was stunned. "Sira, why do you want to learn martial arts? Before, it was to strengthen my body. Now, it is for revenge. I am at odds with Ethan Hawthorne. I must kill him." Serafina's eyes surged with hatred. She truly hated Ethan Hawthorne. Her deep affection had been trampled on by that man for no reason. How could she remain indifferent? Chapter 28. "Don't be hasty. All right, I'll help you. But before that, you must take good care of your body. Don't be hasty." "Of course. Don't worry, I won't act rashly. Brother Quentin, I'm staying alive for revenge," Quentin sighed. Although he wished Serafina would have nothing more to do with Ethan Hawthorne from now on, He couldn't ignore her desire for revenge. Besides, Ethan had harmed Serafina so much. He had to pay the price. Don't worry, I'll help you after that. Quentin began to carefully nurse Serafina back to health. Under his meticulous care, she was finally able to get up. A gloomy atmosphere had recently settled over the general's estate. Under the butler's supervision, all the servants were on edge because their master was in a bad mood. One day, Ethan finally returned to the estate. Before he could even rest, it was announced that the Prime Minister's wife had come to see him. Ethan was stunned. He was about to send her away, but then he remembered that Ivy Blackwood was still in his hands. He was curious to see what this Prime Minister's wife wanted. Eleanor Vance looked somewhat haggard. She stepped down from her sedan chair with a heavy heart. Thinking of her goddaughter, whose fate was unknown, she had finally taken this step. Eleanor hadn't heard from Ivy in a long time. If it hadn't been for Ivy's maid, Rosella, secretly sending her a message, she wouldn't have even known how much her goddaughter and niece had suffered. Eleanor's heart ached. She had originally thought that by getting rid of Serafina, Ethan would be at Ivy's beck and call. Who would have thought that this Ethan would act so unconventionally and go straight to the potter's field? She didn't know how he had found out the truth, but he had imprisoned her daughter. As a result, all their previous calculations had been for naught. Everything was in chaos. The plan couldn't keep up with the changes. Eleanor had to replan for her goddaughter. Standing before the imposing gates of the general's estate, Eleanor took a deep breath. She hoped that the information she had could be exchanged for her daughter's life. But given Ethan's current devotion to Serafina, he should care about this matter. Eleanor was shown to a side hall. After a long wait, a handsome but gloomy man finally appeared. Eleanor was shocked. She had met Ethan before. In her impression, this general was high-spirited and unpredictable, truly hard to figure out. But men were all the same. They liked gentle and considerate women, so she had always instructed her daughter to act that way. But now, Ethan's condition looked terrible. However, this also made Eleanor more confident about her purpose for this trip. "I greet the general." Ethan's impatient gaze swept over Eleanor. "What do you want from me?" Eleanor fell to her knees with a thud. "General, I have come for my daughter, Ivy Blackwood. I hope you will be magnanimous and spare Ivy." Ethan sneered. "You're dreaming. Do you think Ivy Blackwood can leave here alive after all the evil things she has done?" "General, I know Ivy has done wrong, but she did it for you. I implore you to give my daughter a chance." "Heh, I give her a chance who gives Sierra a chance? Since she devised such a venomous plan, she should have anticipated her own end." "Get out." Eleanor knelt there trembling. "General." Chapter 29. Head and body parted. Ethan suddenly drew a long sword and held it to Eleanor's neck. "One more word of nonsense, and believe it or not, I can part your head from your body right now." Eleanor trembled with fear, but thinking of her daughter, she summoned her courage. "General, how about we make a deal?" Ethan looked down at this still charming old woman. Although he didn't know how she had become the Prime Minister's wife, he could tell from Ivy's methods that she was not a simple woman. "What do you want to trade with me? Or rather, what do you have that I need?" Ethan sneered, but Eleanor said anxiously, "What if I said I have news of Serafina Ainsworth?" Ethan's hand holding the sword paused. "What did you say?" Eleanor was terrified, but she forced herself to remain calm. "General, I said, I have news of Serafina Ainsworth. I know she is not dead." Ethan's eyes widened. He stepped forward and pulled Eleanor up from the ground. "Is what you're saying true?" "Of course. Where is Sierra?" Eleanor was being pulled so hard by Ethan that she could barely breathe. "General, I can tell you Serafina's whereabouts, but you must also agree to one condition. Speak. I want you to release my goddaughter, Ivy Blackwood, and from now on, not pursue her for her past mistakes." Ethan was overjoyed and was about to agree, but then he thought, what if Eleanor was deceiving him? The women of the inner court were very scheming, so he couldn't just believe her. Seeing Ethan hesitate, Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. All her hopes rested on Ethan's love for Serafina. If Ethan was not as infatuated as he appeared, then her plan would be for naught. Fortunately, just as Eleanor was feeling anxious, Ethan agreed. "Fine, I can let Ivy Blackwood go, but I must find Serafina first. As soon as I find Sierra, I will release Ivy." Eleanor nodded. She hadn't expected to be able to rescue Ivy from here in one go. "I hope the general will keep his word." "Of course, now you can tell me, where is Sierra?" "I'm not exactly sure where she is, Before Alina could finish, she was grabbed by the neck. Ethan roared, "You dare to deceive me." Alina was being choked so hard she could barely breathe. She struggled feebly. "General, calm down and let me finish." Only then did Ethan let her go. He really didn't want to hear any more ambiguous answers. Alina coughed a few times before lowering her voice. "I once overheard in the estate that Quentin Shaw had arranged for his subordinates to rescue Serafina. It is said that they have a potion called a feigned death potion. After taking it, one appears to be dead, but can be revived with an antidote. So, Serafina must still be alive. Quentin Shaw, who is he? He is the captain of the guards at the Prime Minister's estate. The Prime Minister adopted him. He grew up with Serafina and is very fond of her. He is the one who truly loves Serafina. As for that Leo Kane, he was just a scapegoat. Chapter 30, Jealousy. Ethan's face grew darker. Unbeknownst to him, there was another man who deeply loved Serafina. But at this moment, he also felt incredibly lucky. If it weren't for this man, there would be no Serafina in this world. For a moment, Ethan's emotions were complex. He didn't know whether to be jealous or grateful to this man named Quentin Shaw. "How are you sure that Sierra's matter is related to this Quentin Shaw?" "Of course, I'm sure. For the past month, Quentin Shaw has not been in the estate. No one knows where he went. I think he must have rescued Serafina and hidden her." "Very good, someone. Escort the Prime Minister's wife back to her estate." Ethan knew very well that to find Quentin Shaw, he would probably have to start with the Prime Minister. If he showed up, the other party would definitely not appear. Along the way, Ethan suppressed his joy, his emotions in turmoil. The thought of seeing Sierra soon made his heart pound with anxiety. Would Sierra forgive him? Ethan wasn't sure, so he let his mind wander. Soon, the carriage arrived outside the Prime Minister's estate. Because Ethan had previously come to the Prime Minister's estate in a drunken rage and caused a scene, the servants of the estate had locked the gates early upon seeing him approach. Ethan was helpless. He simply pulled Alina to the front. "Please announce that the Prime Minister's wife has returned." Alaric, who had been avoiding Ethan, was surprised and angry to hear that Alina was in Ethan's hands. From what he knew of Ethan, he definitely wouldn't have kidnapped her. That meant Alina had gone to see Ethan on her own. But what would a woman of the inner court want with Ethan? In any case, Alina was currently the Prime Minister's wife, and Alaric couldn't just ignore her. So he had the gates opened and let them in to avoid causing a scene outside. When they entered the Prime Minister's estate, Alaric, who had no good feelings for Ethan to begin with and had hated him ever since Serafina's death, said sarcastically, "I was not aware of the general's visit. What brings you here?" To his surprise, Ethan knelt before him. "Father-in-law, I was wrong. I have come today to apologize." Alaric sneered. "You are the great General Hawthorne. Killing someone is as easy for you as crushing an ant." "How could you be wrong? It is I who was wrong. I should not have been soft-hearted back then and let my Sierra marry a heartless, cruel beast like you." Faced with Alaric's scolding, Ethan did not dodge or avoid it, but simply bowed his head to the ground. Father-in-law's lesson is well-deserved. Alaric, however, grew more and more sorrowful. His talented and obedient daughter had been tormented to death by this beast. She was so young, and her best years would now be spent in a cold grave. "Shut up. I am not your father-in-law, Ethan Hawthorne. I don't know what you want, but I am not afraid of anything now. I am already a man with one foot in the grave. What do I have to fear? Father-in-law, I truly know I was wrong, but I hope you can give me a chance to reform." Alaric was furious and ordered his servants, "You want to reform? Fine, how about you take 20 lashes from me first?" "Someone bring me my whip." Chapter 31, Whip marks. Ethan remained kneeling, even taking off his outer robe. "I am at your mercy, father-in-law." Alaric was also enraged. Soon, the whip was brought. It was the whip he had used in his youth. Although it hadn't been used for years, it was still very painful. Alaric swung his hand, and the whip struck Ethan's back. Crack! A bloody mark appeared on his back. He didn't even grunt. The guards who had come with Ethan were about to step forward to stop it when they heard him shout, "No one is to come over, or you will be punished for disobeying orders." So, the general's guards could only watch as their master was whipped until he was covered in blood by the Prime Minister. Cold sweat dripped from Ethan's forehead, yet he didn't make a sound. Seeing this, Alaric's anger gradually subsided, and he remembered that Ethan must have come to the estate for some other reason. After a full 20 lashes, Alaric put down the whip. "Ethan Hawthorne, if you are not satisfied, you can go and complain to the Emperor, but I don't regret it. This mere whipping cannot atone for even a fraction of the sins you have committed against my daughter." "Yes, I understand, father-in-law. Actually, I came today because I received news that Sira may not be dead." Ethan stood up from the ground and stated his purpose for coming. Alaric was shocked. "What did you say? Sira is not dead. Where is she now, and how do you know this?" Ethan looked at Alina. "I'm afraid Mrs. Vance will have to explain this." Alaric turned to look at Alina, this woman who had little presence in the estate. "You knew?" Alina braced herself and repeated what she had told Ethan earlier. Alaric was astonished. After all, he had just attended his daughter's funeral, and now he was being told that she was still alive. He was overjoyed, but he also felt that something was wrong. If this matter were to get out, it would only damage his daughter's reputation, especially since she might be with Quentin Shaw right now. Thinking of this, Alaric ordered his servants, "I hope you can keep what you have heard today to yourselves. If I find out that any of you have been spreading rumors, I will have your tongues cut out." The servants naturally agreed. Alaric waved his hand. "You may all leave." After the servants had left, Alaric turned to look at Ethan. "Since the general already knows about this, what are your plans?" This was Alaric's test. If he showed any dissatisfaction or suspicion of Serafina, Alaric would have Quentin take her away immediately. After all, he still trusted the child he had raised. Ethan smiled bitterly. "Father-in-law, I don't want anything right now, just to find Sira as soon as possible. I was wrong before, I listened to slander, and that's why Sira. Now I only hope that Sira can forgive me. I want to find her." Seeing that Ethan's words were sincere, and his feelings for Serafina were genuine, Alaric couldn't help but wonder. He had always thought it was his daughter's one-sided love, but now it seemed there might be some misunderstanding between them. Thinking of this, Alaric couldn't help but ask, "Since you truly love my daughter, why did you do so many cruel things to her?" Chapter 32, Feel free to speak. Ethan was at a loss for words. He simply explained the whole story to Alaric. After hearing it, Alaric was filled with rage. "Absurd, this is simply absurd, that unfilial daughter, Ivy Blackwood. My lord, although Ivy has done wrong, she does not deserve to die." Alina couldn't help but interject. Alaric suppressed his anger, unwilling to air his family's dirty laundry in public. "General, I have a request." "Father-in-law, feel free to speak." "I misunderstood you before. I know that Ivy Blackwood's sins are deep, but I hope you can spare her life for my sake. However, while she may be spared death, she cannot escape punishment. The rest is up to you, General." Ethan thought for a moment. Ivy Blackwood is cruel and ruthless. She owes Sira, and she must pay it all back. Alaric nodded. "The general can decide for himself." "Then Sira's whereabouts? I will have someone investigate this matter. If Sira is truly alive, I will find her. Then I will leave it to you, father-in-law." Because Ethan's back needed to be treated, he left after making arrangements. After Ethan had gone, Alaric's face instantly turned cold. "Men, seize Alina Vance." Several servants quickly came forward and tied up Alina and her servants. Alina said anxiously, "My lord, what are you doing?" "I haven't done anything," Alaric said sternly. "Shut up, you venomous woman. If it weren't for today, I would not have known that you and Ivy Blackwood have done so many things behind my back. Ivy may be ruthless, but she is still young and couldn't have thought of many things. But you are different. Tell me honestly, what have you done to Sira over the years?" Alina wanted to cry out in protest, but she was brutally whipped by Alaric. Alaric's whipping technique was very good. On the surface, there were not many wounds, but in reality, every lash landed on the bone, causing so much pain that Alina couldn't even speak. The few servants were also terrified. Alaric had them dragged to the woodshed and tortured, determined to make them confess. 3 hours later, the guard in charge of the interrogation handed a stack of confessions to Alaric. Alaric glanced through them and felt that the things described were simply outrageous, especially when Alaric's eyes fell on one of the papers. His pupils contracted, and he shot up, his fingers trembling. What was he seeing? His former beloved, Liana, had been turned into a human pig by this wretched woman. Alaric couldn't believe his eyes. For all these years, he had thought that Liana's departure was because of her disappointment in him. But now he saw that it was this venomous woman, Alina, who had turned her into a human pig and hidden her away. Even the letter of departure was forged by Alina. This outcome was agonizing for Alaric. He grabbed Alina's hair and dragged her up. "Wretched woman, what did you do to Liana back then?" Alina had already been beaten to within an inch of her life. Hearing Liana's name from Alaric's mouth, she was still filled with hatred. Alina knew that she would probably not escape death today, but if she could annoy Alaric before she died, it would be worth it. Chapter 33, cut out her tongue with this in mind, Alina struggled to speak. "Alaric Ainsworth, you are just like Ethan Hawthorne, a fool. You believed that Liana had really run away just because of a single letter. You didn't even look for her. But that's good too. If you weren't so foolish, how could I have been the Prime Minister's wife for so many years, haha? You have no idea how desperate Liana was before she died. She became a human pig, and I even cut out her tongue so she couldn't speak. But even then, she still thought you would come and save her. Don't you think she deserved to die?" Alaric was enraged. In his anger, he drew his long sword and stabbed it into Alina's chest. Bright red blood quickly flowed from her body. Alina's eyes widened, and she died without finishing her sentence. The servants were as quiet as cicadas in winter, not daring to move until Alaric gave the order. "Men, throw this woman onto the potter's field and remember, turn her into a human pig before you throw her out." The servants left to do as they were told. Alaric stood alone in the hall, tears streaming down his face. He had never thought that a single mistake back then would lead to such a painful end for his wife. 2 months later in the Prime Minister's estate, Alaric and Ethan sat opposite each other. For the past few months, both Ethan and Alaric had sent their subordinates to search for Quentin Shaw, but to no avail. Half of Alaric's hair had turned white and he looked much older. Learning of his wife's death and having no news of his daughter, his health had deteriorated. "Cough, cough, cough." Alaric coughed incessantly, his face full of worry. "Ethan, are you sure what Alina said is true? Is Sira really not dead?" Alaric could not bear any more blows at this point. Seeing his body grow more and more frail, Ethan was also extremely anxious. "Father-in-law, I am certain of this. Sira is definitely still alive. The lack of news might be because they don't want us to find them." Ethan's past few months had not been easy either. As the days went by with no news of Serafina, he became more and more disappointed, and his temper grew worse. He repeatedly worried that Alina's news was false, but he also kept telling himself that no news was the best news, at least it meant that Sira was still alive. To verify his thoughts, Ethan even had the buried body exhumed and carefully examined by a coroner. The coroner found that the body's fingers were rough, clearly not those of a young lady from the Prime Minister's estate. Only then was Ethan relieved. Alaric was also in agony. His health was getting worse, and he couldn't even attend the morning court session. Fortunately, the emperor knew about the troubles in the Prime Minister's estate and had granted him leave, only summoning him when there were important matters in court. As for Ethan, the emperor simply gave him a long leave and assigned him many guards so he could focus on finding Serafina. Alaric looked at the much thinner Ethan and couldn't help but sigh. "Ethan, you should go back, I'm fine." During these days, when Ethan was not looking for Serafina, he would always come to the estate. The Prime Minister's estate was now much quieter without a mistress, and Ethan had simply requested the emperor's permission to have people from the palace come and help manage the inner court, which also put Alaric at ease. Chapter 34. Seriously ill a son-in-law is like half a son. For so many years, this was the first time Alaric had truly felt the truth of this saying. Fortunately, Ethan came to see him from time to time. Otherwise, he, an old man, really wouldn't know how to go on. Ethan didn't stay long. He still needed to rest well to continue his search for Serafina the next day. However, he was also very worried about Alaric's health. He didn't want to find Serafina only to be faced with Alaric's serious illness. "Father-in-law, you must take good care of yourself. Sira will come back eventually. If she sees you like this, she will surely be worried." Alaric sighed and nodded. "Don't worry, I won't die so easily. I'm still waiting for Sira to come back." The two men chatted for a while longer before Ethan left the Prime Minister's estate. After returning to the general's estate, Ethan was filled with frustration and went straight to the courtyard where Ivy Blackwood was imprisoned. Since he had promised Alaric to spare her life, he had her released from the woodshed. At first, Ivy thought Ethan was going to let her go completely. But before she could be happy, she was locked up in a remote courtyard. From then on, whenever Ethan was in a bad mood, he would come to her courtyard to torture her. No servants were willing to serve Ivy. Even Rosella, who had once been so loyal to her, had been sold off by Ethan. Ivy finally understood. Ethan didn't intend to kill her directly. He was going to slowly torture her to death. Seeing Ethan approach, Ivy screamed and hid behind the door, curled up in a ball. Her wounds had not yet healed. Even though Ethan would have a doctor treat her after every beating. Seeing this, Ethan's anger grew. He strode over, grabbed Ivy's hair, and dragged her out from behind the door. "What? Didn't you say you loved me the most? Why are you so afraid now that I'm here, Ivy Blackwood?" Ivy trembled with fear. Suddenly, a foul-smelling liquid streamed from between her legs, making Ethan feel nauseous. He threw her away, and her frail body slammed into the corner of a table, letting out a piercing scream. It was likely a broken bone. Ethan said coldly, "Get a doctor. Don't let her die." "Yes." The servants in Ivy's courtyard were all experienced torturers specially recruited by Ethan from the Ministry of Justice's prison. They were not surprised by his methods. Besides, the story of how Ivy had framed Seraphina was now known to everyone, thanks to Ethan. No one felt any sympathy for such a venomous woman. Ethan found it all rather boring. He returned to the room where Seraphina had stayed. He had been living there all this time, as if only by doing so could he be closer to her. That night, Ethan fell into a dream. He felt as if he had walked into a paradise, surrounded by tranquility and beauty. Seraphina was on a nearby lawn, catching butterflies. She was as beautiful, lovely, and playful as ever. Sira. Ethan was overjoyed and took a few steps forward. Just as he was about to reach Seraphina, her beautiful face was suddenly replaced by hatred. She abruptly drew a dagger and stabbed it at him. Chapter 35. Waking up in a fright, the hatred in Seraphina's eyes burned Ethan. He suddenly woke up from his dream, drenched in a cold sweat. Ethan had no desire to sleep anymore. He got out of bed, walked to the window, and stared at the moon in thought. He didn't know if Seraphina was alive or dead. The cool night wind made Ethan's already soaked clothes even colder. He couldn't help but murmur to himself, "Sira, as long as you come back, I'm willing to let you kill me." At the same time, in a peach blossom forest in a valley, Seraphina was also dreaming. But unlike Ethan, her dream was filled with all the beautiful moments they had shared. She still remembered the first time she saw this man, how they had fallen in love at first sight and exchanged tokens of their affection, thinking they could recognize each other by them in the future. But why had everything changed later? Seraphina woke up from her dream, her face already stained with tears. This love could have been a memory to cherish, but it was already lost at the time Seraphina got out of bed. The moonlight was beautiful, casting a serene glow over the peach blossom forest, but she had no heart to admire the scenery. Seraphina began to practice her martial arts by the moonlight. Soon, Quentin Shaw walked up slowly from behind. Seraphina stopped her movements. "Brother Quentin." Quentin sighed and said with some disapproval, "Sira, you promised me not to be hasty, but now. Why are you not sleeping and practicing here?" Seraphina lowered her eyes. "Brother Quentin, I just couldn't sleep." The moonlight cast a shadow from her eyelashes, making her look even more cold and fragile, which made Quentin's heart ache. "That's no reason to be practicing. I just want to become proficient as soon as possible." For the past 2 months, Seraphina had initially wanted to learn swordsmanship, but it wasn't suitable for her. Quentin had adjusted her training direction. Under his guidance, she had created her own set of skills. She was skilled with silver needles and could use them to pierce an opponent's acupuncture points from a distance, killing them without a trace. In addition, Seraphina was also practicing her lightness skill. In 2 months, although Seraphina had not yet perfected these 2 skills, she had made some progress, which was due to her tireless practice. Thinking of this, Quentin couldn't help but feel sorry for her. "Sira, I know you're eager for revenge, but I don't want you to live for hatred. I saved your life. I hope you can be happy every day." Seraphina's nose tingled, and she turned her head away uncomfortably. "I know, Brother Quentin, I will never forget your kindness. Between you and me, there's no need for thanks." Looking at Seraphina's beautiful face, Quentin had 1,000 words suppressed in his heart. "Let's wait a little longer. Now is not a good time to confess my feelings. To ensure that Serafina had a balance between work and rest, Quentin specially took her out of the valley. Not far from the valley was a small town on the outskirts of the capital called Chestnut Mountain Town. Quentin brought Serafina to the town's market. At first, Serafina was reluctant to go out. She felt that her skills were not yet perfected and that she couldn't waste time like this. But she couldn't resist Quentin's persuasion and had to go with him. "Brother Quentin, you could have just come out by yourself. Why did you have to drag me along?" Chapter 36. Surprised Serafina, dressed in coarse cloth and wearing a rather plain human skin mask, was being pulled by Quentin towards the market, her tone full of helplessness. Quentin, however, said righteously, "We're out of daily necessities, so of course we have to come and buy them. Besides, I'm not a woman. I don't know about some of the things women use." Serafina sighed, a lie. If he didn't know, why were the daily necessities he had prepared for her before so complete? Serafina knew very well that Quentin wanted her to go out for a walk, but she really had no interest in shopping. Fortunately, Quentin was not a procrastinator. After buying everything and packing it up neatly, they were ready to leave. Serafina had been walking for a while and her feet were a little tired. Seeing this, Quentin suggested, "Why don't we go to the tea stall ahead and have some tea before we go?" Serafina nodded. She was indeed thirsty. They had just sat down at the tea stall when they heard a few people talking at the table opposite them. "Hey, have you heard? I heard that the Prime Minister is going to hold a grand burial ceremony for his deceased wife." "Isn't the Prime Minister's official wife already dead? Why is he holding another burial ceremony? Could it be for his current wife?" Hearing this, Serafina and Quentin exchanged a surprised look. Quentin stepped forward and bowed to the few people. "Greetings, sirs. I am polite. I wonder what you are discussing. Could you let my sister and I listen in? We have no other hobbies, just like to listen to stories and such." The few merchants, seeing Quentin's friendly attitude, also returned the bow. "You are too kind, brother. It's no trouble to tell you. This matter has already spread throughout the capital anyway." The men began to talk animatedly. "I heard that the Prime Minister's former wife was the eldest daughter of the Liu family. This young lady was kind and dignified, very outstanding. Unfortunately, she was a poor judge of character and saved a white-eyed wolf, who is the current Prime Minister's wife, Mrs. Aliner. This Mrs. Aliner came from a poor background, but she was very cunning. After being saved by the Prime Minister's wife, she was extremely jealous and devised a plan to have a one-night stand with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister originally wanted to sell this woman off, but unexpectedly, Mrs. Aliner became pregnant. The Prime Minister's wife was kind and persuaded the Prime Minister to keep her as a concubine. The Prime Minister loved his wife dearly and agreed. Who would have thought that the Prime Minister's wife and Mrs. Aliner were like the farmer and the venomous snake? After becoming a concubine, Mrs. Aliner was still not satisfied and repeatedly tried to ruin the relationship between the Prime Minister and his wife. Then one day, their scheme finally succeeded, and they caused the Prime Minister and his wife to argue. It was originally just a normal argument. What couple doesn't argue? They would have made up in a few days. Who would have thought that the vicious Mrs. Aliner would take this opportunity to imprison the Prime Minister's wife, turn her into a human pig, and then forge a suicide note in the Prime Minister's wife's name, running away from home? Didn't the Prime Minister suspect anything at all? Someone couldn't help but ask. He probably did suspect something, but he never found the Prime Minister's wife, so he gradually came to believe that she was really dead. However, heaven's net is wide and nothing escapes it. Not long ago, the Prime Minister accidentally discovered this, and he immediately fell seriously ill, devastated. Therefore, he wants to bury his deceased wife to comfort her spirit. Chapter 37. Revenge. Hearing this, Serafina felt a darkness before her eyes and a burning pain in her heart. She had not expected that she and her mother had both been framed by Aliner and her daughter. At once, she was filled with both grief and anger, her palms bleeding from her clenched fists. She rushed out like a madwoman. Seeing this, Quentin knew something was wrong. Without a second thought, he used his lightness skill to chase after her. Fortunately, although Serafina had practiced lightness skill, she was no match for the highly skilled Quentin. He quickly caught up to her and stopped her. "Sira, where are you going?" Serafina was furious, her eyes filled with grief and anger. I'm going to kill that mother and daughter to avenge my mother, Quentin stopped her. Sierra, don't be impulsive. This matter is very strange. Your father is the Prime Minister. How could such a secret be known to everyone? Besides, what those people said just now was too detailed. How could ordinary people know so much? Hearing this, Serafina calmed down. She closed her eyes, hiding the tears in them. According to you, Brother Quentin, what should we do? Quentin thought for a moment. We should plan this carefully. It's not too late to make a move after we've investigated thoroughly. Serafina nodded slightly, thinking that Quentin's words were reasonable. She decided to be patient and go back to investigate in disguise as a servant at night. They were both very familiar with the Prime Minister's estate. So, one disguised as a guard and the other as a maid, they secretly slipped into the Prime Minister's estate under the cover of night. It was quiet all around. Serafina and Quentin spotted a lone maid, Rose, and Serafina followed her. Sister Rose, wait for me. Rose turned around and smiled. Oh, it's you, Pearl, you startled me. Serafina said, Sister Rose, do you think the master is really going to rebury the mistress? Of course. You know how the master feels about the mistress. Although this inner court has been in the hands of Mrs. Aliner all these years, now that the truth is out, the master hates her to the bone. But then again, I never thought that Mrs. Aliner could be so cruel and audacious to have deceived the master for so many years. Serafina's heart was filled with hatred. Her voice was a little hoarse. I wonder where that mother and daughter are being held? Rose looked at her strangely. What's wrong with your memory? Weren't they locked up in the woodshed by the master? Oh, right, I almost forgot. Serafina suppressed the hatred in her heart. By the way, Sister Rose, I just remembered I have something to get. I have to go back. You go ahead. All right then, I'll go to the kitchen to boil some water. The master is waiting. After Rose left, Quentin emerged from the shadows, looking at the motionless Serafina with concern. Sierra, are you all right? Serafina's eyes were filled with hatred. I'm fine, Brother Quentin. I'm going to kill Aliner and her daughter. All right, I'll go with you. I'll keep watch for you. Serafina nodded. They went to the woodshed together. The night grew darker, and the entire Prime Minister's estate was eerily quiet. Two tall and sturdy servants stood outside the woodshed door, obviously guarding the mother and daughter. Serafina and Quentin exchanged a look, and they each knocked out one of the guards. Chapter 38, so satisfying everything went smoothly. Quentin looked around and saw nothing amiss. He then said to Serafina, Sierra, go in quickly. I'll keep watch for you here. Thank you, Brother Quentin. Although Serafina's heart was filled with hatred, she still opened the woodshed door very carefully. With a creak, the door opened. By the moonlight, Serafina saw the mother and daughter huddled in a corner. They were both tied up, their heads bowed, perhaps resting. Serafina's eyes were red. She rushed over with murderous intent, grabbed Ivy, and before she could react, she had inserted silver needles into her acupuncture points. For a moment, Ivy could not move or cry for help. Serafina lowered her voice. Ivy Blackwood, I have some questions for you. Answer honestly. Not if it's yes, shake your head if it's no. If you don't speak or lie, I will insert a silver needle into the top of your head and let you die in excruciating pain. Do you understand? Ivy nodded repeatedly. Serafina said, I have recently heard rumors that my mother was killed by you. You turned her into a human pig, imprisoned her, and let her die in agony. Is this true? As soon as Serafina finished speaking, Ivy nodded without any hesitation. Serafina hated her to the bone. Then Daisy, did you kill her too? Ivy nodded again, and Serafina's hatred grew even stronger. And my personal guard, Leo Kane, did you kill him too? You held his family hostage and made him frame me. Do you admit to all of this? Ivy continued to nod. Serafina's eyes were already red, and her voice was hoarse. Ivy Blackwood, why are you so cruel? I never did anything to wrong you. Even when my father disliked you, I often spoke up for you in front of him. But why were you so cruel, killing my mother, harming my handmaiden, and even framing me, causing me and Ethan to turn against each other? A person like you is not worthy of my silver needles. Even in death, you can only die by the dagger. Serafina took out a dagger and stabbed it at Ivy. It all seemed to happen in an instant. Just then, Ivy, who had been sitting on the ground tied up, suddenly stood up and grabbed Serafina's wrist. This person was tall and sturdy, clearly not a woman. Serafina's eyes widened. What was going on? Why had Ivy turned into a man? Before she could come to her senses, the human skin mask on the person's face was torn off, revealing a face that Serafina was all too familiar with. It was Ethan Hawthorne in that instant. Serafina was stunned. Countless thoughts raced through her mind. She had been tricked. Serafina was about to speak, but Ethan was one step ahead of her and sealed her acupuncture points. Now, the one who could not move or speak was Serafina. It turned out that this was all Ethan's plan. For so long, they had had no news of Serafina, and they were growing anxious. So, Ethan and Alaric had decided to set a trap to lure her in. Ethan knew that Serafina cared most about her mother. After getting Alaric's consent, he had spread the news of how her mother had been murdered. He was taking a gamble, betting that Serafina would come back to kill the culprit and avenge her mother. As it turned out, he had won the bet. Chapter 39. Despicable. At that moment, Elinor also stood up. She was also a tall and sturdy man. Serafina recognized him. He was Ethan's personal shadow guard, Tiberius. Serafina felt a mix of bitterness and anger. She had calculated everything, but she had never expected Ethan to be so despicable. Serafina glared at Ethan, wishing she could cut him into 1,000 pieces, but she was completely unable to move. Serafina gritted her teeth in hatred, her chest aching with pain. But she saw Ethan approach cautiously, his eyes gentle as he looked at her. "It's you, isn't it, Sira?" Serafina sneered inwardly. What a hypocrite. The day he had wanted to kill her, he had been much more ruthless than this. Serafina closed her eyes, unwilling to look at Ethan's hateful face. But Ethan gently tore off Serafina's mask. The moment he saw her familiar face, his eyes turned red. "It really is you, Sira." Serafina didn't want to bother with him, but Ethan took the initiative to stroke her face, his gaze full of tenderness. His movements were incredibly gentle, but to Serafina they were disgusting, nothing more than a humiliation. "Sira, where have you been all this time? I'm sorry, I was wrong before." As Ethan spoke, he hugged Serafina. She opened her eyes in surprise, hatred surging through her like a tide, but she was still under his control, unable to do anything but let him. Fortunately, Ethan didn't hold her for long. Instead, he began to recount what had happened during this time. He smoothed Serafina's slightly messy hair. "Sira, do you know? 2 months ago, I really thought you had left this world for good, and at that time, I wasn't sad. Instead, I thought you had brought it upon yourself. I mistook Daisy for you, thinking she was my beloved. But later, when I was sorting through her belongings, I realized that all along, the one who had truly loved me was you. At first, I didn't dare to believe it. I thought it was another conspiracy. I went to find the lover mentioned in Daisy's manuscript, Hugo Thorne, and it was only from him that I confirmed everything. How foolish I was to have been blind to you all along, to have mistaken you for someone else. After I learned the truth, I investigated Ivy Blackwood and found that she was the true mastermind behind everything. It's laughable how I, who considered myself so clever, was played by a woman. I tortured Ivy Blackwood, but unfortunately, even though I got the truth, you were already gone. I retrieved the body I had thrown onto the potter's field and gave it a proper burial. I started drinking heavily, even going to the Prime Minister's estate to make a drunken scene. But my heart was still so empty. I knew I had lost the most precious thing in the world, an irreplaceable true heart. Ethan's voice grew more and more choked. Later, I spent all my days at your grave, drinking and playing the flute. I still remember when we first met, you were drawn by my music, and I was captivated by your dance. I played non-stop, day and night, unable to sleep. I thought about killing myself to be with you, but then I thought, if I died, who in this world would remember how wonderful you were? I couldn't let myself off so easily. I had to live in pain, carrying my love for you. This was my punishment. My temper grew worse and worse. I thought I would never see you again in this life, but then Elinor Vance came to me. She offered to trade Ivy Blackwood's life for your whereabouts, and then it was an endless search. I wished I could search heaven and earth just to find you." Ethan paused and sighed heavily. He hugged Serafina tightly again. "Now, to see you standing before me, safe and sound, I am truly happy. Sira, thank you. Thank you for being alive. Thank you for coming back here." Serafina closed her eyes, her heart filled with hatred. Such sentimental words, if only she could have heard them sooner, it would have been so much better. But it was all too late. Now, it was a fight to the death between them. Serafina opened her eyes again, a coldness in them. Chapter 40. Kill me. After Ethan had finished recounting the events of the past few months, he gently released Seraphina. Sira, if you are unwilling to forgive me, then kill me. If you are willing to forgive me, then come out with me, all right? As Ethan spoke, he released Seraphina's acupuncture points. Her eyes red, Seraphina silently took out a silver needle and sealed several of Ethan's major acupuncture points. He was immediately unable to move or circulate his energy. Otherwise, his blood would flow backward, and he would die. But Ethan seemed to feel nothing at all, standing there without dodging or evading, just looking at Seraphina with doting eyes, a hint of a smile in them. This was the first time in a long time that he had smiled again. To have lost and then regained was truly a great joy in life. He should be happy. Seraphina's heart was in turmoil. She was about to give him the final needle to end his life, but as the needle was about to pierce the top of his head, she looked at his affectionate gaze and couldn't help but ask, "Why don't you dodge?" Ethan, however, smiled brightly. "I was just thinking of when we first met. After every meeting, you would always be like a little butterfly, fluttering around, and I would always watch you quietly from the side. Don't you think this is a bit like that time?" Seraphina's eyes turned red, and the silver needle in her hand hesitated. It was clearly a matter of life and death. How could it be compared to a date? This man always knew how to accurately touch her soft heart, to move her. "Do it, Sira. In the end, it's all because I was too foolish and was deceived by Ivy Blackwood. Kill me, and it will be revenge for the wrongly accused Leo Kane and Daisy." Seraphina's mind flashed with the painful past. On their wedding night, he had punished her by making her kneel naked before the bed, watching him and Ivy make love. He had thrown her into the bone-chillingly cold water just because he suspected she had drugged him. He had made her cut her own flesh to save someone, and he had even repeatedly forced himself on her, completely disregarding her pain. Seraphina's heart was being torn apart. She had once truly loved this man with all her heart, even though he had hurt her time and time again. But now she had learned to let go, because the woman who had loved Ethan Hawthorne was too tired and too pitiful. Seraphina hardened her heart and stabbed at Ethan with the silver needle. Ethan closed his eyes, but Seraphina stopped at the critical moment. She had thought she could forget their past feelings without a second thought, letting hatred override her reason. But when she truly faced this man, Seraphina found that she couldn't do it. She just couldn't bring herself to do it. Ethan waited for a long time, but he didn't feel any pain. He opened his eyes and saw that Seraphina was already in tears. Ethan's heart ached. He reached out and held her tightly in his arms. I'm sorry, Sira. It's all my fault." Ethan's heart was filled with both pain and joy. The warm, soft body in his arms was his treasure. He couldn't help but lower his head and cover her beautiful red lips. To soothe his longing, Seraphina struggled, trying to avoid the kiss. But Ethan's hands were like iron clamps, holding her body firmly, gentle yet incredibly strong. His soft lips kissed the corners of her mouth forcefully, sucking wantonly, his powerful movements as if he wanted to swallow her whole. "Sira, I'm sorry, I love you." Chapter 41. Ignoring it, Ethan repeatedly apologized in Seraphina's ear, his deep affection impossible for anyone to ignore. The familiar orchid fragrance began to spread around them. Under the bright moonlight, Ethan pressed Seraphina against the wall. Seraphina's eyes began to glaze over. As his tongue delved deeper into her mouth, she resignedly closed her eyes, letting the strange passion wash over her. Ethan's strong hand held hers, wrapping it tightly in his palm, just as she was now trapped in his embrace, letting his lips and tongue plunder her mouth, tasting her sweetness. The orchid fragrance became more and more intoxicating. Seraphina felt her body grow hotter, her breathing heavier. Seraphina opened her eyes and met Ethan's brilliant gaze. In the darkness, his eyes were like a sky full of stars, yet filled with deep affection. Seraphina was momentarily lost. She subconsciously licked her slightly numb lips. This shy response made Ethan even more passionate in this game of love. His hot kisses gradually moved downwards, his strong hands holding her almost limp waist. His fiery lips kissed down her neck, sending shivers through her. A soft moan escaped her tightly bitten lips. The orchid fragrance was bewitching. Ethan became more and more aroused, his eyes already tinged with desire. He held her slender waist even tighter, their breaths intertwining, so close Seraphina could almost feel the heat of his body, so hot it felt like it could burn her. Serafina tilted her head slightly, looking at the repressed yet frenzied man before her with hazy eyes. Countless thoughts raced through her mind, finally pulling her back from her passion. In the next second, a silver needle pierced into Ethan's acupuncture point. He let out a muffled groan, his entire body unable to move. Serafina's eyes were clear. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, but her eyes were exceptionally sad. The room was still filled with the seductive orchid fragrance, but she took a step back. Ethan Hawthorne, I have never blamed you. I only hate that fate has played a trick on us and that you didn't trust me. Sierra, I know I was wrong. Can you give me another chance? Ethan's voice was full of affection, his eyes filled with regret. But Serafina closed her eyes, tears welling up. There are no more chances. Too many lives lie between us. We can never go back to the way we were. Ethan Hawthorne, from now on, there is nothing between us. Goodbye. Serafina turned without hesitation, and Ethan watched her back with a deep gaze. Quentin Shaw, who had been waiting outside, did not know what had happened in the woodshed. Seeing Serafina come out with red eyes, he was somewhat worried. How did it go? It's settled, Brother Quentin. Let's go. As they were about to leave, a group of men suddenly rushed out from the previously empty bushes and surrounded them. Quentin's pupils contracted, and he was shocked. He looked at Serafina. Sierra, what's going on? Did we fall into a trap? Serafina's heart was in turmoil. She had clearly controlled Ethan, so how could? Chapter 42. Sierra, I love you. Before Serafina could figure it out, Ethan walked out from inside, not looking like he had been trapped at all. Serafina looked at him with a complicated expression. You lied to me? Ethan, however, gave her a gentle smile. I didn't lie to you, Sierra. Have you forgotten? When you taught me how to use silver needles, I also taught you that acupuncture points can be shifted. You should have known. You clearly couldn't control me, yet you still came to kill me, using the very silver needles you once taught me. Serafina pressed her lips together, seeming unwilling to hear him say any more, but Ethan continued on his own. Sierra, you still have me in your heart. You never forgot me, did you? Quentin was stunned, then his eyes turned cold. Sierra, was he the one in the woodshed? Serafina lowered her head without a word, but her expression confirmed it. Quentin's heart ached. He looked at Ethan, then at Serafina, and suddenly noticed that the orchid fragrance on her was stronger. Looking closer, he saw that her lips were redder than before, and her eyes were slightly red. She looked enchanting. It was obvious what had just happened in the woodshed. Quentin's heart was filled with rage. He stepped forward and grabbed Serafina's wrist. Sierra, come with me. Ethan narrowed his eyes, his cold gaze falling on Quentin's hand holding Serafina. Attack, keep them here. But be careful not to hurt the mistress. Upon receiving the order, the guards all attacked Quentin. Although Quentin was skilled, he was outnumbered. And since he had to protect Serafina, he was at a disadvantage and looked rather pathetic. This group of guards had been specially assigned to Ethan by the Emperor. They were all top-notch experts. Coupled with their excellent coordination, they quickly surrounded Quentin and Serafina. Quentin wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Ganging up on someone is not what a hero does. Ethan stepped forward. I just want to keep Sierra here. What does it matter if my methods are despicable? Serafina's expression was complicated. She lowered her head sadly and pleaded with Ethan, General, please let us go. It was wrong of me to trespass into the Prime Minister's estate and harm you, but I did not come for you. Ethan frowned slightly. What if I refuse? Serafina was stunned. Quentin snorted. The General is truly impressive. To treat a weak woman like this, aren't you afraid of being ridiculed? This is my family's business. What does it have to do with you? Sierra is my wife. She should naturally return to the General's estate with me. Is the General joking? Everyone knows that the General's wife died of illness a few months ago. Oh, right, it could be said that she didn't die of illness, but was killed by the General himself. Ethan's face turned pale. The foolish things he had done in the past were indeed irreversible, but he was unwilling to lose Serafina just like that. Today, no matter what the other party said, he would take her back. Just then, Alaric arrived with Ivy Blackwood. Months of torture had taken their toll on Ivy. She was tied up, her messy hair hanging down her back, looking utterly wretched. The moment she saw Ethan, Ivy trembled as if she had seen a ghost, her eyes filled with terror, as if she were terrified of him. Chapter 43. Tears streaming down, Alaric saw Serafina in the crowd at a glance, and tears immediately streamed down his face. He pushed his way through the encirclement and grabbed her hand. "Sira, it's Sira, thank goodness. You're really not dead." Serafina was also pained. She didn't want to hurt her father, especially since he was the only one in the entire estate who had doted on her. She looked over. In just a few months, Alaric had become much more haggard, looking much older. His once dark hair was now mostly white, likely from excessive worry. Feeling guilty, Serafina bent her knees to kneel, but he stopped her. "Child, don't kneel. It's your father who has failed you," his voice choked with emotion. Serafina knew what he was talking about: his failure to protect her mother, and his being deceived by Alina and her daughter all this time. She should have hated him, but she couldn't bring herself to. He was her father after all, and in a way, he was a victim too. "No, father, it is I who have been unfilial, causing you to worry. You told me before that Ethan and I were not a good match. It was I who was stubborn and insisted on marrying him. Now, I have put you in a difficult position." Alaric wiped the tears from his eyes. "Sira, there's no need to say any more. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." As he spoke, his gaze fell on the cowering Ivy. He dragged her over. "You wicked creature, get on your knees before Sira. Do you think you can be so easily forgiven for all the wrong you've done?" Ivy quickly knelt. "I'm sorry, Sister Sira, I was wrong. I shouldn't have harmed you." She kowtowed repeatedly, begging for mercy, but Serafina suddenly felt a sense of apathy. Ivy's forehead was already bleeding from the kowtowing. She knew very well that her life was now in Serafina's hands. If Serafina forgave her, she could live. Seeing this, Alaric felt a twinge of pity. He had always had trouble having children, and in his life, he had only had 2 daughters. Although Ivy had made a grave mistake, she was still his flesh and blood. Therefore, Alaric looked at Serafina. "Sira, Ivy knows she was wrong now. Please spare her life." Serafina was stunned, looking at her father in disbelief. "Father, what did you just say?" Sensing her displeasure, Alaric sighed. "Sira, I know this may be hard for you to accept, but to err is human, and to be able to correct one's mistakes is the greatest good. Ivy has already been punished. I will discipline her well in the future. So, can you forgive her for her mistakes and spare her life?" Serafina suddenly laughed, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. "Father, is this why you brought Ivy here? Not for repentance, but to beg for her life. Do you think that since I'm not dead, what Ivy did isn't a capital crime? But have you ever thought, what if I had been unlucky, or if Brother Quentin's rescue had failed? Then who would Ivy be begging for mercy from now? I know you think she's Mrs. Aliner's biological niece, so you can't bear to." Alaric fell silent, his old face flushed with embarrassment. Chapter 44, "Spare me." Serafina continued, "Father, I cannot forgive her. She is a bewitching liar, as wicked as her mother. I can be indifferent, but what about my poor mother? And the innocent Leo Kane and Daisy who died so tragically? Father, you love your daughter, that's true, but who will speak for the families of Leo and Daisy?" Serafina's repeated questions made Alaric's old face flush with shame. He stood there, filled with guilt, while Ivy, seeing this, cried out, "Daddy, save me. I know I was wrong. I'll change. Spare me." Alaric looked at Serafina with pleading eyes, at a loss. Serafina suddenly felt that nothing mattered anymore. The dead were gone. Perhaps she shouldn't have come back. What good would revenge do? It would only bring more trouble. At this moment, she just wanted to leave. Just then, a flash of silver light suddenly appeared in the air, and a figure descended with it. Then, the silver light flashed again, and scarlet blood sprayed out. Ivy's head rolled to the person's feet. Everyone looked up and saw that it was Daisy's lover, Hugo Thorne. "Ah!" The servants who had come with Alaric couldn't help but scream. Alaric was also so shocked by the scene that he staggered. Everyone else was stunned. "You may have spared this woman, but I cannot. I must avenge Daisy, and now I have done it." Hugo retreated to Serafina's side. "Miss Ainsworth, you once helped Daisy, so now I can help you leave this place." Quentin Shaw nodded. "Then thank you very much." Hugo and Quentin attacked together, protecting Serafina as they made their way out. With Hugo's help, the guards were forced to retreat. Seizing the opportunity, Quentin stabbed his sword into Ethan's chest. Seeing Ethan injured, the guards were thrown into chaos. Ethan was anxious. He endured the pain and ordered, "You must keep the mistress here, do not harm her." "Sira, let's go." Quentin pulled Serafina, and they slowly made their way out of the Prime Minister's estate. Ethan clutched his bleeding chest, his face pale as he chased after them. The bright red blood filled Serafina's eyes like a blooming flower, a shocking sight. Serafina felt a pang in her heart, and her steps, held by Quentin, became heavier. "Quick, you two, I have a carriage ready outside the Prime Minister's estate." "Sira, don't leave me." Ethan staggered and finally fell to one knee, blood dripping from his chest, but he paid it no mind. Serafina could not walk any further. She felt as if Ethan had created a cage with his blood and feelings, and she could not escape. Hugo was already in the carriage, calling to Quentin and Serafina. "Come on." Serafina's gaze met Ethan's. His eyes were filled with sorrow and pleading. He was begging her to stay, and looking at the endlessly flowing blood, Serafina's heart finally softened. She pushed Quentin hard. "Brother Quentin, you go." "I'm staying." Quentin was stunned. Then he said angrily in a low voice, "Sira, are you crazy? Your revenge is complete. If you don't leave now, when will you?" Chapter 45. "I'm sorry, you should go." Serafina couldn't help but cry. "But I can't bear to see him die in front of me." "Brother Quentin, I'm sorry, you should go. Don't worry about me." Serafina gave up the chance to leave with Quentin and ran back to Ethan's side. Her silver needles flew, quickly stopping his bleeding. "Sira, thank you for staying." Ethan held her hand, a smile on his lips. Serafina looked at the shocking wound. "Don't talk, don't say another word." Ethan wanted to say something else, but he finally fainted from exhaustion. Serafina's choice left Quentin stunned and disappointed. He seemed to have lost all strength to escape. His long sword fell to the ground, and he was quickly captured. Hugo, who was waiting at the gate, saw this and couldn't wait for them any longer. He drove the carriage away from the Prime Minister's estate. "Sir, should we give chase?" Ethan had fainted, and now the only one in charge at the Prime Minister's estate was Alaric. The guards asked him for instructions. Alaric seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. He waved his hand dejectedly. "Forget it, this is fate. Ivy killed the innocent Daisy and Leo Kane. She has finally paid the price." At that moment, Quentin was brought before Alaric. He hung his head, his face full of disappointment. Alaric sighed and waved his hand at the guards. "Let him go." Quentin was released, and he looked at Alaric in surprise. "Prime Minister, you don't blame me?" Alaric said sincerely. "I am grateful to you. How could I blame you? If you hadn't been protecting Sira, my daughter would have been long gone." Quentin smiled bitterly. "You overpraise me, Prime Minister. I was only acting out of my own selfish desires." Alaric smiled. "Quentin, you grew up by my side. I know your thoughts. In fact, I have long considered you half a son. Are you willing to stay in the estate?" Quentin knew that he would probably never have a place in Serafina's heart. Instead of leaving here and never seeing her again, it was better to stay in the Prime Minister's estate. At least occasionally, he could still see her. "If you are willing to take me in, I am naturally willing to stay." Alaric stroked his beard with satisfaction. "In that case, you can stay with peace of mind. How about you continue to be the captain of my guards? Thank you, Prime Minister, for your kindness." Quentin stayed, but Serafina had no time to talk to him. All her thoughts were now on Ethan. After Ethan fainted, Serafina had him taken to her room. Seeing this, Quentin was heartbroken. All of this was seen by Alaric. He knew Quentin's feelings for Serafina, and he had watched this child grow up. He couldn't bear to see him so lost. Alaric walked to Quentin's side. "Quentin, love is a matter of two people. You can't force it, don't be too sad." Quentin lowered his head, his expression dim. "Sir, I understand this principle. I'm just worried. Ethan is a general. He's been high and mighty since he was a child, and his temperament is unpredictable. Now, he may be attentive to Sira because he's found her again, but what about in the future? Will he hurt her again like before?" Alaric patted his shoulder. "If that day ever comes, I will help you kill him." Chapter 46. Indulgence. Quentin took a deep breath, looking more spirited. "Thank you for your guidance, sir. Rest assured, I will not dwell on the past." Alaric stroked his beard with satisfaction. "That's right. A man need not worry about finding a wife. Besides, you are a fine young man, Quentin. If you trust me, I can put in a good word for you in court. I remember that many ministers have daughters of a suitable age." Faced with the Prime Minister's teasing, Quentin was speechless. "That won't be necessary. Thank you for your trouble, Prime Minister. I don't want to get married for the time being." Alaric laughed heartily. Serafina, in her room, vaguely heard her father's laughter and finally felt relieved. She carefully cleaned Ethan's wound, her heart full of worry. Quentin's sword had struck near Ethan's heart, and the massive blood loss had kept him from waking up. Serafina diligently applied medicine to him every day, carefully changing his bandages and talking to him. She spoke of the things that had happened since they had met, her voice full of a heart-wrenching nostalgia. However, after several days, Ethan showed no signs of waking up. Serafina didn't say anything, but she was extremely anxious. She practically stayed by his side day and night. One day, Serafina didn't come to eat again. Alaric couldn't help but sigh. "Has the general not woken up yet?" Quentin couldn't help but ask. "No, and I don't know why. The imperial physicians have all come to see him. They say the wound has basically healed and that Sierra's medicine is very appropriate, but why won't he wake up?" Hearing this, Quentin also frowned. "Is Sierra still in the room?" "Yes, and she hasn't eaten breakfast." "It really worries me." Hearing this, Quentin stood up. "I'll go see her and bring her some food." Alaric nodded. "All right, go and try to persuade her. Maybe she'll listen to you." Quentin carried the food box and walked along the familiar path to Serafina's room. How many times had he escorted her back along this path? But now she was no longer his. When Quentin arrived outside Serafina's room, he heard her speaking in a low voice. "Ethan, you have to wake up soon. Do you remember the black rice cakes we once ate together? If you wake up, shall we go and eat them again? Also, I once promised to make you a money pouch by hand, but you know my needlework is terrible. If you don't wake up soon, I'll secretly go and buy one. You won't know the difference anyway." Every word Serafina said was filled with warmth and sweetness, if only the other person wasn't lying in a sickbed. At that moment, Quentin's feelings for Serafina finally faded away. He could protect her, give her a sense of security, but he couldn't make her heart flutter. Serafina's feelings for Ethan were much deeper than he had imagined. Quentin walked into the room. "Sierra, brother Quentin, what are you doing here? I brought you some food. You've lost weight these past few days," Quentin said with a hint of heartache. Serafina smiled and took the food box. "Thank you." Looking at the unconscious Ethan on the bed, Quentin felt a little guilty. "I'm sorry, Sierra. Do you blame me? If I hadn't stabbed him, he wouldn't be lying here unconscious now." Chapter 47, Fulfillment. Serafina shook her head. "Brother Quentin, with your swordsmanship, you could have killed him with that strike, but you didn't. So I don't blame you. Besides, you are my lifesaver. How could I repay kindness with ingratitude?" Quentin sighed. "You saw through me. Actually, at that time, I really wanted to kill him. I originally thought that if he died, you might leave with me." Serafina said decisively, "If he died, my life would have no meaning." "Yes, I know you can't let him go. Before, in the peach blossom forest, I wanted to tell you my feelings several times, but I never did. I guess I knew that even if I did, I wouldn't have a chance. Thank you for your understanding and fulfillment, Brother Quentin." Serafina said with great sincerity, "Brother Quentin, I must thank you solemnly. Since we were young, you have always protected me. I have always cherished these things in my heart. You have always been like my own reliable brother." Quentin reached out and stroked her hair, completely transforming his romantic feelings into the affectionate bond of family. "Rest assured, in this life, I will always stand behind you and protect you. So, Sierra, you must be happy." "I will. You too, Brother Quentin. I hope you can find your own happiness." Quentin smiled without a word, but his heart had finally loosened its grip. Perhaps it was time for him to let go. Ethan had been in a coma for 7 days and 7 nights. During this time, he kept dreaming, calling out Serafina's name in his sleep. Serafina took care of him day and night. Sometimes, when she was tired, she would just fall asleep by the bed. On the morning of the 8th day, the sky, which had been overcast for many days, finally cleared up. The sunlight playfully danced in through the window and landed on Ethan's face. His long eyelashes finally fluttered slightly, and he slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the face he had longed for. Serafina was resting by the bed, her charming face showing a hint of fatigue, with faint dark circles under her eyes, clearly from not having rested well for many days. Ethan's gaze traced her beautiful features, reluctant to wake her. However, perhaps because his gaze was too intense, Serafina suddenly woke up. Then, she was overjoyed to see that her beloved had regained consciousness. "General, you're awake." Serafina burst into tears for no reason. She should have been happy, but she didn't know why she felt so wronged. It was just that Ethan had slept for too long, and it had really scared her. She had even prepared herself for the possibility that he would never wake up. Thank goodness, he had finally woken up. Ethan was deeply moved. The thought that Serafina could have left but had stayed for him made him grip her hand tightly. "Sierra, Ethan Hawthorne, swear on my life, I will never fail you." Serafina's face bloomed with a smile. A month later, Ethan had fully recovered. He brought Serafina back to the estate. The servants of the general's estate all respected this legendary mistress, thanks to the butler, Tiberius. He had witnessed the general's dejection firsthand. This mistress was the general's life. Early this morning, Ethan got out of bed and helped Serafina get up as well. Chapter 48. Birthday. These days, Serafina had been a bit sleepy. Ethan simply accompanied her, causing the emperor to call him out several times in the Great Hall for being late. And everyone in the court knew that this powerful General Hawthorne was a doting husband. "General, why are you up so early today? Did the emperor summon you for a meeting again?" "Of course not. Do you remember what day it is today?" Serafina yawned, and with Ethan's help, put on her shoes and socks. "What day?" "I don't remember. Could it be your birthday? That doesn't seem right." Serafina tapped her head. Seeing this, Ethan quickly grabbed her hand. Forget it. If you can't remember, don't think about it. Anyway, just come out with me today." Serafina looked at him inquisitively. Seeing his mysterious expression, she stopped asking. He was just teasing her, wasn't he, preying on her curiosity? Ethan took Serafina out of the general's estate. They traveled lightly, with only a shadow guard and a maidservant to attend them. The carriage sped along and soon arrived at a pastry shop. Serafina looked up and was stunned. She was very familiar with this place. It was here that she had first met Ethan. Serafina was lost in memories. That year, she was just a young girl. After swapping identities with Daisy, she had come out to play. Hearing that the steamed cakes here were delicious, she had bought a portion. But who would have thought that just as she had excitedly bought the cakes, and before she could even taste them, she would be bumped into by Ethan, and the freshly baked cakes would fall to the ground. Serafina had been so upset at the time that she had blocked Ethan's way and demanded that he compensate her for her cakes. Ethan seemed to be in a hurry for something, but he was being held back. He anxiously promised to treat her to steamed cakes after he had finished his business. Serafina had believed him wholeheartedly and had simply waited there. As a result, Ethan had not come that day. Serafina had been furious, exclaiming that she had met a liar. When she had told her father about it, she had even been laughed at. They had met again a year later. That day, she had also gone out to play. Seeing a particularly beautiful forest, she couldn't help but dance. As she danced, she heard the melodious sound of a flute. They had fallen in love at first sight. Serafina smiled. "General, I finally remember what day it is. It's the day we first met." Ethan smiled. "Yes, I was thinking at the time, which family's young lady is this, who loves to eat so much? What if she gets fat?" Serafina hummed twice. "I won't get fat. I only eat steamed cakes occasionally. Besides, I didn't even get to eat them that day." "Then today, shall I treat you to as many as you like?" Serafina gave him a haughty glance. "What's the point of eating so many? Am I not going to have lunch today?" Ethan laughed heartily. He simply had the steamed cakes packed up and taken to the forest where they had often met on their dates. This forest was very beautiful. It was now spring, and the air was filled with the fresh scent of flowers, which was very refreshing. Ethan and Serafina rode on the same horse, leisurely strolling through the forest, occasionally exchanging a light kiss, feeling comfortable and warm. Chapter 49. Punishment. Speaking of which, this place is not much different from the peach blossom forest where Brother Quentin took me to live before. As soon as Serafina finished speaking, she saw Ethan's face darken. "You're thinking of another man while you're with me. It seems I'll have to punish you properly." With that, Ethan held Serafina's chin and kissed her directly, their lips and tongues intertwined, leaving them breathless. When they finally finished the kiss, Serafina couldn't help but glare at him. "What are you getting jealous about again? Brother Quentin is just like my big brother," Ethan snorted. "I don't care. Who let him covet you? You are my treasure, and no one is allowed to covet you." "But Brother Quentin has a girlfriend now. Aren't you being petty by bringing up the past and getting jealous over and over again?" Serafina couldn't help but roll her eyes. This man was sometimes so childish. Ever since Quentin and Serafina had cleared the air, The Prime Minister had simply adopted him as his godson, allowing him to stay in the Prime Minister's estate more legitimately. And sometimes, he would often go to the previous peach blossom forest to stay for a while. And just a while ago, Quentin had accidentally saved a female martial artist. That woman was heroic and had a very generous personality. After being saved by Quentin, she had been following him around. In her words, people of the martial world valued kindness the most. Since Quentin had saved her life, he was her husband. Quentin had never seen such a free-spirited woman before. But after spending time with her, he discovered that this forthright woman also had a softer side. They had gotten entangled and had eventually fallen for each other. Last month, Quentin had specially asked Alaric to be his matchmaker and had gone to the woman's home to propose marriage. No one was happier than Serafina that Quentin had found a good match. She had always felt a little guilty towards him, and from now on, she could finally let go of this burden. They dismounted and walked hand in hand through the forest. Ethan suddenly felt inspired. "Sira, would you like to hear me play the flute?" Serafina raised an eyebrow and said knowingly, "I think you want to see me dance." Ethan laughed heartily. "Since you know my intentions so well, my lady, why don't you start dancing?" Serafina rolled her eyes at him, but she still danced as he had asked. Ethan began to play the flute. The light and melodious music echoed through the forest. As Serafina danced, the orchid fragrance from her body spread, attracting countless butterflies. It was a beautiful sight. Ethan stood there, watching his beloved surrounded by butterflies, looking like a flower fairy. He was so lucky to have such a wonderful person. Just as the atmosphere was perfect, Serafina, who was dancing, suddenly turned pale. She quickly stopped and leaned against a nearby tree, retching. Seeing this, Ethan was shocked. He rushed forward nervously, scooped her up in his arms, and rode straight back to the general's estate. The servants of the general's estate were all startled. The general and his wife had gone out happily, but why had they returned with such worried expressions before it was even dark? "Someone, go to the palace and fetch the imperial physician." Seeing Ethan's nervousness, Serafina couldn't help but comfort him. "General, don't worry so much. I know my own body. Maybe I just caught a cold. There's no need to see a doctor, is there?" "No," Ethan's face was serious. "You must see a doctor. You suffered so much before. The doctor said you might have developed a chronic illness. It's all my fault." Chapter 50. The grand finale. Seeing her beloved's dejected expression, Serafina quickly grabbed his hand. "General, these things happened so long ago. There's no need to dwell on them, right? I'm fine now, aren't I?" Ethan sighed. "I wish I could hold you in my heart every day so you wouldn't get cold or hurt." Serafina smiled. "I'm not an object. How can you hold me in your heart? So, I can only hold you in my mouth." Ethan whispered in her ear, causing her to blush. This Ethan always teased her, but it was also because of this that whenever she was in a low mood, she would quickly be coaxed back to happiness. Soon, the imperial physician arrived. After carefully taking Serafina's pulse, his face was full of joy. "Congratulations, General, the mistress is with child. It has been over 2 months. Ethan was overjoyed. He hugged Serafina tightly. "Sira, did you hear that? We're having a child." Serafina was also blushing shyly. Due to her previous health problems, her periods had been irregular, and the doctor had said it might affect her ability to have children. Serafina had been disappointed for a long time, but she had not expected to get pregnant so quickly. It was truly a blessing from heaven. "Who's having a child?" As they were talking, Quentin Shaw entered from outside, followed by a charming woman in red. "Brother Quentin, it's Sira, she's pregnant." Ethan was extremely proud. Quentin was stunned, then his face was also full of blessings. "Then, congratulations. Congratulations to you too. If I hadn't taken Sira to the suburbs to ride horses and dance today, I wouldn't have found out." Ethan became even more proud. Hearing this, Quentin's face darkened. He gritted his teeth. "Ethan Hawthorne, what did you say? You took Sira to ride a horse, and she danced. Do you have any idea that she's pregnant?" "I didn't know before, brother-in-law. Please forgive me. No, today I must teach you a good lesson." The protective older brother, Quentin, even with his own beloved, was fiercely protective of his sister. Serafina watched as Quentin and Ethan fought, and she couldn't help but laugh out loud. The woman in red looked at Serafina with envy, then suddenly joined the fray, pulling Quentin out. Stop fighting, let's go home and have a baby too. You're Sierra's brother, you can't be outdone. We have to have a baby early. Quentin was dragged away, stumbling and confused. After a long while he said, "Wait a minute, we're not married yet. What kind of baby are we having?" "I don't care, I want to have a baby today." The woman in red, free and easy, dragged Quentin away. Ethan, who had been pulled out of the fight, laughed heartily. He really liked this forthright sister-in-law because every time Quentin found trouble with him, he would be dragged away. Serafina chuckled. Ethan walked to her side and held her hands tightly, his face full of sweetness. "Sierra, thank you." Serafina met Ethan's affectionate gaze. "General, meeting you is truly the luckiest thing in my life. If heaven let me do it all over again, even knowing I would go through so much suffering, I would still choose to be with you." Ethan lowered his head and kissed her lips. "If heaven let me do it all over again, I would not let you suffer so much. I would hold you in the palm of my hand from the very beginning, hold you in my mouth, and make you my treasure." Serafina couldn't help but blush. "You smooth talker." Serafina snuggled into Ethan's embrace. No matter what, she was very happy now. She was not greedy. More than 6 months later, Serafina gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. His Majesty the Emperor personally named them and bestowed many rewards, and Ethan doted on Serafina even more. Alaric adored the 2 children. Half a year later, Quentin got married, and in October of the same year, his child was also born. According to later unofficial histories, General Hawthorne only took one wife in his life, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister. The couple lived in harmony and loved each other for their entire lives. They had a son and a daughter, both of whom later wrote their own legends. End of story.